We're going to go ahead and start recording.
This meeting is being recorded.
Perfect. If we could, and we go ahead. All right, let's go ahead and start.
Good evening. Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being webcast on Comcast TV Channel 15 and live streamed on the city's YouTube channel at https://www.youtube.com/user/City of Hayward and on the city website at https://hayward.legistar.com/calendar.aspx. The mayor will call upon members of the city council, city staff, and other speakers by name and ask that they state their names before giving comments or remarks. Individuals participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. City council members and members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature, and the mayor will call upon them at the appropriate time. Members participating via teleconference wishing to speak should dial *9, and they will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received by email at list-mayor-council@hayward-ca.gov, cityclerk@hayward-ca.gov, or via e-comment by 3 p.m. will be distributed to the city council and staff, published on the city's meeting and agenda center under documents received after published agenda, and entered into the record. Documents received after 3 p.m. through the adjournment of the meeting will be included as part of the meeting record and published the following day. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. In order to get the full Zoom experience, please make sure your application is up to date. Public members wishing to speak with the City Council can send an email to list-mayor-council@hayward-ca.gov or cityclerk@hayward-ca.gov.
Thank you. And with that, I will call this meeting of the Hayward City Council to order and ask Councilmember Marquez to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening.
Mayor, I'm having issues with Zoom. I don't know if you could see me. It just completely.
Yeah, and I can see you. Yeah.
I'll deal with that later. So let's go ahead and start. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Good evening. Councilmember Andrews.
Present.
Councilmember Lamnin.
Here.
Councilmember Marquez.
Present.
Councilmember Salinas.
Present.
Councilmember Wahab.
Here.
Councilmember Cermeño. Absent. Mayor Halliday.
Here.
Thank you.
So with that, I will ask our city attorney, Mr. Lawson, if he will give us the closed session announcement.
Greetings, Mayor and Council. The Council convened in closed session at 5:30 with all members present, except for Councilmember Cermeño, who was absent. Please refer to the closed session agenda. The first item dealt with discussion of labor with all labor groups. Council discussed and took no reportable action. Second item was conference with legal counsel on matters posing a threat to the public's right of access to public services or public facilities. The council discussed the matter and took no reportable action. And that completes the closed session. report.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on now to public comments. This is an opportunity to comment on any items not otherwise on our agenda. And so I just briefly want to ask our city clerk if she will briefly go over the different ways you can make a public comment, and what you can expect to see if you do have your hand raised through Zoom, particularly.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to do that. And we'll go ahead and show on the screen. Wonderful, thank you so much. So community members wishing to join the meeting via Zoom can follow information on the first page of the agenda, which is also displayed on the screen right now. The information is also available on the screen for those viewing the meeting via the city's YouTube channel, the city website, as well as channel 15. Now, if you are using Zoom to join the meeting, click on the raise hand option to request to speak. When joining via phone, press *9 to raise your hand. I will unmute your microphone when it's time for you to provide public comment. Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And yeah, so I do see we have some hands raised, so let's go ahead.
All right, perfect. And the first one I see is from TJ, Hayward Concerned Citizen. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm TJ with Hayward Concerned Citizens. We wanted to keep in the forefront the upcoming council decision on the authorized use of drones for police and fire in our city. I know you've received some emails with regard to this as well. The use of drones across various businesses as well as law enforcement agencies is becoming more of a general standard of practice in today's world. Fire has already been using this technology to detect hotspots in building fires, such as our Holiday Bowl that now is no more. Police forces in other cities have already been using drones with good outcomes. One of these cases involved the arrest of a Hayward felon who committed 2 armed robberies in Fremont in November. Fremont police detectives in the Special Operations Unit were able to deploy a drone to catch up with the suspect on foot. So if the question boils down to whether HPD is deserving of having the modern technology and tools to provide more protection to all parties involved in a crime in progress, the answer is yes. The use of drones would be a win-win for our city, greater accountability, less fatalities. Our group urges council to please keep this in mind when this item is back on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
We have McLean Olson. Please go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you very much for having me and for selecting my hand. I am not currently working for HARD, Hayward Area Recreation Park Districts, but I did for about 10 years. This is regarding the potential closures of camps at East Avenue Park, Potawatomi, Vida Nueva, and Tenderfoot. If you guys have been in the city of Hayward, you've probably heard of them at some point, and maybe even your kids went there. We've heard that they are trying actively to put these programs in with Rec Innovation. I understand that HARD is a different entity than the city entirely, but what we're really looking for is for these programs to stay intact. They've been around for, 70 plus years. There's a lot of tradition. There's a lot of education that happens for our community through these programs, environmental, but also for leadership purposes. I started as a 13-year-old volunteer, and now I work as a victim advocate for my local police department because I learned everything that I learned basically at that camp for 10 years. And I'm certainly not alone. Also, camp produces 3 times the profit of the Rec Innovation every year since 2016. And I know that that may not sound much for a city council, but as far as Parks and Recreation go, that's pretty hefty. And we were just wondering if there's any way that anyone could help kind of bridge that gap between city to hard to ensure these programs remain intact for our youth. So thank you very much. And my contact information will be available for anyone who's willing to discuss it with me. And I thank you very much.
Thank you. And we do have meetings with members of the HARD Board of Directors and staff quarterly through an organization called the Hayward Local Agencies Committee that also includes the school district as well as HARD in the city. And I think those who are representing, and I think we just changed, it's myself, Council Member Lamnon, correct? And Council Member Andrews, I believe. Yeah. Okay. And we will, one of us, I'm sure, if not all three of us, will remember to bring that up at our next meeting. Thank you for the comment. Okay. And moving on, it looks like Suzanne is next.
Yes. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Luther, and I'm also a member of Hayward Concerned Citizens, and I wanted to speak on the issue of approval and funding of drones for the HPD. I think it's pretty obvious that we should be allowing them to use these modern day tools. They can help with de-escalation of situations involving mental illness, violent acts, things like that. Also, they can help with disaster management and recovery, in search and rescue for situations such as earthquakes. And we all know an earthquake is coming. So I think this would be really important to approve of this. It'll also be used to catch criminals. And I just wanted to say that this is not an area that we should be considering defunding of the HPD. I think that the drones are very important, and I hope that you, Mayor and council members, will approve the use of them and the funding of them for HPD. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, it looks like we have Jeffrey Bouchard.
Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I'm actually sort of in the same boat as McLean, and I'm actually an ex employee of HARD as well. I worked at the same summer camps that she did, and it's actually, I worked with McLean when we were both camp counselors, so it's good to hear her voice. And I don't want to necessarily repeat what she said, just want to reiterate that I think everybody who has gotten wind of the camps possibly closing down, or their hearts sort of sank, and we want to do everything we can to sort of intercept that before it's too late. And we want to make sure that it's clear that it's an important part of the community, and we appreciate any efforts you guys can put forward to work on this.
Okay, thank you. And our next, Chief Ferreira.
Go ahead. You can go ahead and unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Now we can.
Okay. Hi, my name is Tom Ferreira. I'm with the Hayward Concerned Citizens. I'm talking to you today about drones for our police department. Like with any other job, it's important to have all the right tools for that particular job or task. Having drones is another part of that toolbox that the police need for safety, not only for themselves, but for the community and the people that are causing the problem. This equipment helps the police know what they're walking into and what to expect. Also, our Hayward Fire Department already uses a drone system for safety of their firefighters as well. All I'm saying is it's important to have these type of tools on board for the safety of our city. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So I don't see any other hands raised now from the public. And Madam City Clerk, are you aware of any? I think one just went up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Howard. I'm also here to talk about the closures of camps Potawatomi, Tenderfoot, and Vida Nueva through the HARD recreation programs. So pretty much just to reiterate what everyone else was saying is that we're all a little bit devastated in hearing that these camps might be closed. Me personally, I was never a camper, but I joined as a volunteer at 13 and instantly fell in love with these camps. The staff had a real true passion for entertaining and uplifting their campers, and the campers showed real growth and enjoyment in the environment that had been created. I ended up working there for 15 years and spending my last 5 years as the director there. And to say camp has shaped me personally would be an understatement. It gave me the tools that I needed to excel in the world. Today, I join you from New Zealand, where I'm working on getting my PhD, and I can undoubtedly say that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for camp. There, I learned how to communicate and work with my peers, how to create innovative solutions for difficult situations, and how to reflect on my actions to allow for personal growth. Camp is an absolute service to our community and a hub for growth for Hayward's youths. This example has been repeated time and time again in the volunteers, campers, and staff that eventually move on from camp and go on to benefit our society and community as lawyers, scientists, engineers, teachers, and principals, just to name a few that I've noticed from ex-staff members. And to this day, I still have parents and ex-campers reach out to me and express how much camp has changed their lives for the better. So camps, Potawatomi, Tenderfoot, and Vida Nueva are an absolute treasure to the Hayward community, and I implore you to help us please keep the camps open. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I imagine you got the record for being the person most distant from Hayward making a public comment at the moment. Okay, next, it looks like we have a couple more now.
Yes. Have Alicia?
Hi, this is Alicia Lawrence. I'm a member of the Hayward Collective and the Community Services Commission. And while I didn't anticipate speaking at this moment, I just wanted to speak in response to some of the people calling about the drones. And I just want to offer for consideration, every time I know that there's this idea of well, the drones are only X amount of dollars. Well, when we say, well, this program is only X amount of dollars. Oh, and that program that we're going to fund in another 3 months is only X amount of dollars. All of those things add up to significant amounts of money. And so I just want the council, when you consider the drone program, to consider it not as just the single funding item, but in this concept of, well, how many of these one-off things are we funding? And how much do they add up to? And if we took all of those one-offs, how could we fund the community to help themselves? Someone brought up emergency response. Community members need to be able to address emergencies block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. They don't need to wait for police to come and tell them how to help themselves. They need to be empowered to help themselves. And so when you're making those deliberations about the drone program and the money, and maybe it's only this amount of money this one time, it really needs to be considered in the context of, well, how many of these single programs do we keep funding on off the cuff? And if we took and bundled all of those programs, how could we empower the community to help themselves instead of expecting them to wait on the police to help them? Thank you.
Thank you. And I see another hand.
Hi there, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Lauren Corbis. I am also coming, we're kind of going back and forth here from drones to expression of advocacy for the East Avenue camps with the Hayward Area Recreation and Park District. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I just wanted to express our appreciation for any advocacy and support that the City Council and the City of Hayward can provide for our East Avenue camps. I served as director of the camps, as well as Ryan Howard, who is informally known as Gato at those camps. We have our camp names, but I served until 2019, and with the pandemic last year, our camps unfortunately could not exist. So I just wanted to reiterate that I have a deep love for these camps as well. I began attending the camps when I was 5 years old, and I've been going to them and serving as a volunteer, a junior counselor, a counselor in training, a counselor, and most recently as director since I was 5 years old. So the camps are so special. We've seen children grow, we've seen leaders grow, and everybody who's spoken here tonight about them just has attested to the immense incandescency of our camps and the magic that exists in that place when we are able to take kids exploring the canyon and teaching them educational materials in a way that has been continuous and historical for so many years. So thank you guys for listening to our requests, just for your support as we continue to hope to see these camps thrive in the future post-pandemic. Thank you guys.
Thank you. With that, I'm not seeing any more hands, so I will close.
Mayor,
I will not close public comments because we have a Councilmember Marquez, who wants to make one.
yes, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to ask the city manager if she could provide the public with updates. Unfortunately, there was a homicide that occurred last Wednesday, March 31st, as well as a police encounter video that's been surfacing social media, an incident that occurred this past Saturday. So I just wanted to know if you could provide the public with an update to those two separate incidents.
Sure. On the first incident, the homicide, unfortunate, just incredibly unfortunate and tragic event that happened sort of mid-afternoon in downtown, where a woman was stabbed to death in the parking garage. Police have detained a suspect in that investigation, and it does appear that the suspect and the woman who was murdered knew each other. It's unclear how long, but it was not a random act of violence. It does not appear that way. So just wanted to, not that it makes it any better, but I just want to reassure the public that it was not a random act that occurred in downtown, and it does appear that the two individuals were known to one another. So that's currently the status, and we are increasing just presence in downtown of police and also security guards in that garage, just temporarily, just to help sort of calm things down with some of those incidents. We've had a couple other incidents that have happened in downtown, so just trying to keep an eye on that. The other incident that you had mentioned, there was cell phone footage that we have seen. It was regarding an incident that happened, I believe, in the grocery outlet parking lot over the weekend, where there was an individual who was detained by several police officers after reports had come in regarding some behaviors. And so we obviously are taking a look into that, and based on the video, an internal affairs investigation has been launched consistent with department policy. And obviously we don't want to draw any conclusions until that investigation is complete, but we do recognize that we want to be as transparent as possible in that incident. And if it's warranted after the investigative process, the officers will be held accountable within the boundaries of the law based on that internal affairs investigation. So that is currently underway. So thank you, Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you for the information. I know there's been lots of inquiries about those matters and others, but thank you for the update.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Wahab.
Thank you. I just want to highlight some of the comments that were made today. Number one, to my colleagues who work more closely with HARD, I would be supportive of trying to see and understand a little bit more of what type of city partnership could benefit these particular campsites, especially as we have some funding. And I do believe that recreational activities for our younger community is needed. So I just want to offer my 2 cents on that. So I'd be very supportive to see some traction there. Number two is that I do want to highlight that maybe about a week and a half ago now, I did spend some time with our police community group. I forget their actual term of their group specifically, command center. Thank you. Slipped my mind for a second. I spent the day with them up to the evening even. And we went and toured a lot of different homeless encampments. And I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of individuals that were experiencing homelessness. And, you know, I do want to highlight to the community that one of the difficulties right now under COVID is, you know, we are seeing individuals camp, and we are restricted by CDC laws that we are not allowed to really engage. And we want to ensure that, you know, individuals that are experiencing homelessness remain as is, kind of like the shelter in place, number one. So I know that a lot of community members have been talking about that. I do want to highlight that the Five Flags area has been relatively cleared out. Individuals there were offered housing and services, and several of them I spoke to, and several of them actually showed me their new housing station right then and there, some in hotels, some in our navigation center. I do also suggest to all of my colleagues to potentially do the same thing. It's actually very insightful. You can ask as many questions as you guys want. I think Sergeant Faye Maloney and her team, Officer Gonzalez and Davis, you know, had very similar thoughts to, you know, some of us on council as to how to deal with mental health and homelessness. So I did want to highlight that. It was very informative. It was very interesting. I do think that there's a lot of things that we don't know on a detailed level. You know, for example, senior homeless individuals actually experience far more crime. They are targeted, they are retaliated against, and so much more. So I do want to highlight that. And then as far as the drone conversation to our city manager, I do believe you referenced this, I want to say last week, but when do we plan on discussing that?
Probably not until late May or early June.
Okay. So I did want to just highlight that we are going to have the Lean Innovation team, the handful of commissioners, city staff that have been working tirelessly on it, and not only the meetings that have been made you know, viewable to the public that is online, which our city manager can highlight on which link it is, but they also have been having multiple meetings that are, let's say, empathy interviews, and have been doing a lot of work amongst each other, more so than actually is on the scheduled calendar. They will be presenting their ideas or their findings on April 26th, which is a Monday. It's a special meeting. I would recommend everybody to highlight that on their calendar. It's of interest, I think, that for all of us as we talk about public safety being better for us. So I do just want to highlight those things. And to our city manager, if you have any comments regarding that in particular.
No, and there'll be sort of a two-step process on those recommendations. The first will be at the Budget and Finance Committee on the April 26th meeting, as you mentioned. And then what we'll plan to do is we had originally thought we were going to do the presentation at the May 15th Saturday budget work session, but we're going to do a discussion on May 18th of sort of some budget recommendations around the ideas that come out of the Policy Innovation Workshop. So that'll happen on May 18th, which is also scheduled on a Tuesday night as a budget work session, but we're going to focus specifically on those issues that evening.
All right. Thank you.
All right, and I'll just add to the discussion here that the next meeting of the Hayward Local Agencies Committee, which is the joint City of Hayward, Hayward Area Recreation District, Hayward Unified School District group, is going to be on May 13th. That is a Thursday, May 13th at 4:30 p.m. It will, of course, be still, I think, on a virtual meeting. On Zoom. So watch for that if you are interested in the camp issue or anything else. And I see Councilmember Andrews would like to make a comment as well.
I was just going to say during referral that I actually met with Director Rick Hatcher at the Eden Area Garden to discuss opportunities for us to partner for specifically youth. So we will definitely continue that conversation, and I'll also bring up camps with them as well. So it is a conversation that's happening now.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we will now close public comments. and move on to our action items. We have our consent calendar this evening, 4 items, items 1 through 4. Madam, if there are any council members who wish to pull an item, Councilmember Wahab. We're not hearing you. No.
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself. I'm not necessarily trying to pull anything. I'll move the items. I just wanted to clarify that for the minutes in item 1, I do want to highlight that for that particular minute in item 1 in the staff report, that I did highlight that we voted on items that, at least for me, I voted on items that we didn't already vote on previously or worked on or was completed. So just highlighting that one more time. And I know that our city clerk can take care of that, but just wanted to move the item then.
Second.
All 4, 1 through 4.
Okay. I heard, so the items 1 through 4 have been moved by Councilmember Wahab, and your comment is well taken, and seconded by Councilmember Marquez, I believe.
Correct.
Here, I just want to make sure that the council's aware on item 3 of the change to the resolution that documented in the memo, and just make sure that that's incorporated in the motion.
I will include that, and I'm sure our seconder will include that
Yes,
as well.
thank you for reminding us, and the seconder also agrees. Okay, yes. So the motion to approve the consent calendar with the addition of the change to item 3, I believe it, right? That was sent to us today. Basically adding the words "not to exceed" and the motion by Councilmember Wahab, seconded by Councilmember Marquez. Madam City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Andrews.
Aye.
Councilmember Lamnin.
Aye.
Councilmember Marquez.
Yes.
Councilmember Salinas.
Yes.
Councilmember Wahab.
Yes.
Councilmember Cermeño, absent. Mayor Halliday.
Yes. The motion carries with 6 aye votes and 1 member absent. So we will move on now to item number 5, which is a work session on community agency funding for fiscal year 2022. And we will be hearing about the recommendations from our Community Services Commission for arts and music, economic development, infrastructure, and community services. So with that, I think Assistant City Manager Ott will kick us off. Is that correct?
I actually think Community Services Manager Monica Davis is going to kick us off.
I see.
Sorry about that.
Right in front of me here, but my agenda says otherwise. But please, Monica, Ms. Davis, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Monica Davis, and I'm the Community Services Manager, and I'm here with Carol Lee, who was previously with Public Works, but joined my team in February of 2020, just before the world shifted, and has been project managing the community agency funding process. Tonight, we will be presenting on the fiscal year 2022 community agency funding recommendations, as well as the fiscal year 2022 annual action plan. And City Manager McAdoo, will you help with the slides, or should I go ahead and share my screen?
You may have stepped away.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead, and I don't have your presentation actually, so.
Oh, okay. I'm happy to do that.
That would be great.
All right. All right. So this evening, I just want to go through the presentation outline just to identify we're going to have a couple pause points. First, I'd like to take some time to acknowledge some recent accolades that our community services commissioners received. We'll then go ahead and do an overview of our fiscal year 2022 annual action plan, and then shift gears to discuss and I'll hand it over to Ms. Lee to talk about the fiscal year 2022 community agency funding process, as well as the funding recommendations for general fund, which includes arts and music, as well as social services. And at that point, we'll pause and take public comments and questions from council and feedback. And then because of Councilmember Andrews' previous support and service to a nonprofit, she'll step away, and then we will continue with the presentation and discuss the community development block grant funding grants that focus on public services, economic development, and infrastructure. And then again, open it up to public comment and just council questions and feedback. And staff is here to essentially recommend that council review and comment on the annual action plan, as well as the community agency funding recommendations from the CSC. So as I mentioned, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our wonderful community services commissioners. They received an award for multiplying good called 1 in a Million. And the award essentially acknowledged the work that our community services commissioners do. They spend a couple Saturdays and months of work reviewing applications and really dedicating themselves to ensure that the most vulnerable residents in Hayward are receiving services. And so wanted to take a moment to also acknowledge them for this award that they received. They also received a $500 stipend as a group and decided to contribute that to the Hayward Relief Fund. So again, continuing the good work that they do. And many of them are in attendance this evening and may join us later in commentary. So turning it over to the fiscal year 2022 annual action plan. This is essentially the framework that we use, the one-year plan in which we communicate how we are spending our federal money from HUD, and identifies high needs and priorities throughout the community and through different community input processes, identifying how to spend those monies, and essentially what we use to help facilitate and provide input for our community agency funding process around CDBG funds. And this annual action plan is actually, 1 year snapshot of our consolidated plan, which is 5-year span. And so council approved the consolidated plan last year in June. And so we are now moving forward to request approval of the annual action plan, or review at this point, I should say. And it was informed by the public comment period and the development of the consolidated action plan. Several of our community services commission meetings in which we heard from our members and community members who called in about what they wanted to see in the community needs assessment that was conducted in 2019 to help inform the consolidated plan, as well as our point in time homelessness count called Everyone Counts. In that, in the annual action plan, separate from the administration, the priority needs identified in the annual action plan include 4 primary categories, including expanding and improving public infrastructure facilities. And that can look like providing a nonprofit with a new roof, or replacing an electrical panel for a nonprofit agency. Again, preserve, protecting, and producing housing stock well in alignment with council's strategic roadmap. And that includes small grants to make home improvements, as well as funding for affordable housing development. And then, of course, public services, such as the funding the nonprofit agencies that have applied for the community agency funding process that you'll hear more tonight. And then economic development, which can include some of these small grants that have been given out to businesses of 5 or fewer employees. And the annual action plan is posted on the city's website for public comment and review. And so the easiest way to find it is just to search annual action plan on the City of Hayward's website, and that will be up for some time period to solicit feedback. And now I'll switch gears a little bit and we'll transition into the community agency funding process, and I'll hand it over to Carol. And Carol, let me know as you'd like me to advance your slides.
Thank you, Monica. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council, and members of the public. Like Monica said, I will provide an overview of the community agency funding process and then present the FY22 general fund funding recommendation. As many of you are already familiar, the community agency funding process is an annual, highly competitive funding process for general funds and community development block grant funding. There are two sources of this funding, and they are the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the City of Hayward. Every year, this process gets kicked off with the publishing of the Notice of Funding Availability, and that occurred on October the 2nd of last year. Staff then held a virtual mandatory bidders conference in November. In total, there were 46 attendees, and overall, it was very successful considering it was the first time we held it virtually. Staff provides information during this bidders conference to the potential applicants. This includes information on funding eligibility, financial considerations. Staff walks through the application process, timeline, and answers questions. That very same day, the application packet becomes available online, which gives applicants about a month to fill in their applications. The applications were due on the 11th of December, and once they were all submitted, staff and the Community Services Commission completes a thorough review of all of the applications and compiles a list of agency-specific supplemental questions that are shared with the agencies prior to their interview. Let's see, later that month, at the CSC meeting of December the 16th, the Application Review Committee selections were made, and throughout this presentation, I'll be referring to these committees as ARC or ARCs for short. And so the ARCs conducted all-day virtual application interviews on 2 Saturdays in January. The Economic Development and Infrastructure ARC interviewed applicants on the 23rd. The Arts and Music ARC did the same for arts and music applicants on the 30th. And the Services ARC met on both Saturdays to interview their respective applicants. In February, the ARC draft recommendations were presented to the full CSC and public comment period began. While there were discussions, the CSC did come to consensus to move forward with the ARC recommendations. At the March 17th meeting, the CSC unanimously voted to recommend the funding as outlined this evening. In the next slide, we'll see changes to the funding process. If you could advance, that'd be great. Thank you. Oh. In the next slide. There we go. So in addition to meeting the standard criteria, the ARCs also evaluated this year an agency's ability to adapt their service delivery model to continue providing quality services while adhering to federal, state, and local COVID-19 guidelines. Furthermore, the CSC expressed interest in exploring alternative funding sources for some of the projects that have historically been funded through the community agency funding process. And this really was in order to create some space and opportunities for new and innovative programs that could meet the unique and evolving needs of our community. In alignment with the Racial Equity Action Plan, the CSC engaged in discussions around the importance of funding programs and services that are designed to advance racial equity and opportunities for all people in Hayward. As part of FY22 funding process, staff responded to the request of the CSC by implementing changes to the application so that we could collect additional demographic information from the agency's staffing in addition to the individuals that they served. The CSC also stated their desire to include racial equity to the criteria for future funding and expressed an interest to further support minority-led organizations, especially Black-led organizations in the future. In the next slide, the application review committees, as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 of them, and they hosted interviews on 2 days in January. As we'll present later in the presentation, year over year, the need continues to grow and the funding remains relatively the same. And so the ARCs were faced with challenging decisions about how to appropriately allocate funds with consideration to the CSC and city's goals to provide resources and services to those in our community that need it the most. Each of the ARCs engaged in extensive deliberation, weighing criterias, including an agency's capacity, their ability to leverage other funds, history providing quality services, ability to meet targeted outcomes, and the community's need for these services. So in recognition of their work, at this time, we really want to acknowledge the Application Review Committee members and chairs and thank them for the work that is behind these recommendations. Specifically, Commissioner Emily Chow chaired the Infrastructure and Economic Development ARC, Commissioner Magdalena Cerna chaired the Arts and Music ARC, and Commissioner Artavia Berry chaired the Services ARC. Thank you. In the next slide, we'll see the FY22 available funding by category. The CDBG awards are dependent upon federal funding allocations, and the general fund awards are subject to available budgetary funding. Per the City of Hayward CDBG Compliance Policy Manual adopted by Council in 2014, each CDBG program year, the cost of administration, HUD-related fair housing services, and audit allocations are deducted from the annual entitlement award. And for FY22, $25,000 of the CDBG administration category is allocated to ECHO to provide fair housing services to residents in Hayward. And this is through a non-competitive award. Additionally, Eden INR will also receive a non-competitive services award of $50,000, but from the general fund to operate the 211 communication system line. On the bottom right corner, you'll see bolded there that the total available funding for FY22 is just over $1.9 million. In the next slide, we'll see the requested FY22 funding by category. The city received 47 applications, and the requested funding by category is shown in this table. The city was notified on March the 2nd that it would receive a CDBG entitlement award, which was greater than what staff originally estimated for the ARC deliberations. And just to be clear, the funding recommendations this evening reflects the actual CDBG entitlement award. Even with these additional funds, though, you can clearly see here that there's quite a disparity between what was requested and the amount that's available. In the next slide, you'll see a graph here, and it depicts the total amount of funding that has been available over time. And while there's some fluctuation over the years, the amount of funding in FY22 remained relatively consistent with the previous year. You can see that CDBG is the darker green, general fund is on top, the lighter green, and again, the CDBG award is dependent upon federal funding allocations. In the next slide, we'll see another graph here, but this graph depicts the total amount of funding over time compared with the total funding requested over the same periods. The line here shows the available funding totals that was shown in the previous slide, so both the CDBG and the general fund available funding, and the bars represent the total funding requested. It's important to note that the significant increase in funding requests in FY22 is partially driven by $2.3 million in requests from 3 agencies requesting capital or property acquisition projects. And we can go to the next slide. So now I'll present a more detailed look at the FY22 funding recommendations by category. I'll present the general fund recommendations. Like Ms. Davis said, we'll have a time for question and discussions, and then Ms. Davis will continue the presentation of the CDBG recommendations. So in the next slide, here we have the FY22 funding recommendations for arts and music. In this chart, on the far left, you'll see the agency, then the proposed projects, their FY21 award, what they requested for FY22, followed by the FY22 recommendations. It's important to note with a single asterisk, we noted with a single asterisk on this slide, a new program. And also you'll see with 3 asterisks, that indicates that Hayward Area Historical Society is acting as a fiscal sponsor for 3 other programs. In total, the arts and music recommendation for FY22 is $82,000. In the next slide, in the same way, I'll present the social services. We'll look at the FY22 funding recommendations. And just to be clear, these services would be funded by the general fund. This information will be presented over 3 slides, but I'll explain the groupings as I advance. And so in the slide in front of you here, this chart, we present the projects that promote food security and health. There's also one program here on this slide, and the total food security and health related services recommendation for FY22 is approximately $128,000. In the second of social services slides, this is the housing and homelessness response slide. There's also one new program here. And for the homelessness related services recommendation for FY22, it amounts to about $155,000. And the last slide for FY22 funding recommendations for social services. These projects promote information and referral, legal services, and promotes youth and education. On this slide, there are two new programs. It'll appear that they had $0 for FY21, but that's because this is their first time requesting funding. And then one important thing to note on this slide is Eden INR is listed first here, and they are getting the non-competitive award for the 211 communication system. The total respective services recommended for FY22 in this slide is $122,000. And at this time, I'll turn the presentation back over to Ms. Davis to continue.
Thank you. One other component that we wanted to highlight for you all is that during the ARC deliberations, as well as at the full Community Services Commission, there was a discussion that in the event more funding were to be made available, how would that potentially be allocated? And so these were the high identified areas, food security, health, and housing and homelessness, which is probably unsurprising to council, as these are articulated, interested areas for funding. But in the event there are additional funds, and this evening you will hear a conversation, or you'll engage in a conversation with the work session around stimulus funding, that these were the identified areas of funding to focus on from the Community Services Commission. So with that, we'll pause here to discuss both the annual action plan feedback and any council questions or discussions with respect to the general fund funding recommendations.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So let's see. So can you take the, can you take the?
Oh, absolutely. You want me to stop sharing?
The stuff, yeah, sharing. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and open public comment on this right now. This is a work session item, so we'll have questions and comments from council together. And this is the first part. We'll go to the second. Yeah. Okay. So, and I don't actually see any hands raised among attendees. Yes, I just saw one. So we'll open public comment and go to Commissioner Artie Garg, who is here with us tonight.
Hi, thank you. Can you all hear me? I'm not sure. Okay, great. Yes. Thank you so much for recommending me, Mayor Halliday. My name is Artie Garg. I'm a Hayward resident and am a member of the Community Services Commission. In the past, I've also served as a member of the Keep Hayward Clean and Green Task Force. And I wanted to provide a little bit of public comment about the recommendations that we made on the Social Services Commission, but also make myself available for further questions if council has them about the recommendation. And also, I would like to start by providing a reminder to council that this year, for the second time, we had slightly different ARC process where the general fund social services and the CDBG public services funding was considered by the same ARC as opposed to being through two different ARC processes. And the goal of that was to ensure we could kind of have a broader picture of the services recommendation across the two funding pots. And so we also tried to take that into consideration. I'd like to first start by saying I hope you endorse the recommendations. We spent a lot of time trying to deliberate with a very difficult decision-making process given the oversubscription rate that we had for the funding that was available. As Carol pointed out, we took into consideration, I think, a few different factors that we haven't necessarily made explicit in the past, particularly around racial equity. That's both in line with what the city government is doing and what we think is important as a commission. But I wanted to also, I've mentioned this to a couple council members before. I think that, there is this very high oversubscription rate, and it's very challenging from the commission standpoint to make these decisions. Having some clarity around, particularly with the general funds, what council sees as the goal of these funds. Is it to help seed new programs? Is it to fund programs that would have difficulty getting funding from others? I think that having some articulation as to why the council provides these general funds and not just what categories of services that are priorities for the city, but I think a clear articulation of why we are one of the few cities that actually offers this much general funds for services, I think would be very helpful. I'm stating that for myself, not for the commission at large. And I thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your service on this commission. I know it's one that a few of us have served on, and it's a very rewarding commission in some ways because you get to give away money, or you make awards some money. But I know that it also involves a lot of hard work and a lot of tough choices and decisions. So I know I speak for all of us in thanking all of you. And we'll go, I believe this is another member of the commission, Alicia. Is that Alicia Lawrence? And I believe she is also a member of the commission. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, yes, this is Alicia Lawrence, and I am a member of the Community Services Commission for a few years now. And so I just wanted to, I served on the Arts and Music ARC this year, and so I am available if there are any questions on any of our recommendations. But I do hope that council moves all of our recommendations as they are. Well, not moves. This is a workshop. Apologies. But, supports our recommendations as they are. And just wanted to give some acknowledgement to Monica, who has been a great manager of our commission, and to the entire team for all of their support, particularly throughout this past year with everything moving online.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we have Alexis Villalobos.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me today again. I wasn't necessarily planning to call on this item, but I was reviewing some of the documents and some of the reports earlier today. And something that I can't help but think is, a lot of what we're talking about here are social services, services to help our communities, the ones most in need. And I think one major change that's coming up, something that we haven't seen before, is the unprecedented amount of evictions that we may be seeing in the next year or two as these moratoriums start being lifted, as we enter the new normal. And so in addition to that, we also have this really rapidly evolving legal system for tenants, for tenant protections. We have city moratoriums, we have county moratoriums, we have state moratoriums, we have the federal moratoriums, and we really need to be able to have an enforcement mechanism, or at least legal services for tenants to be able to know what their rights are. And I'm not, here pushing for you to adopt a new resolution or to, pass these policies to protect these tenants, even though I think that's really what, you should be doing. But at a very bare minimum, having the resources to enforce those laws, or for them to have counsel and representation to protect them from evictions. Because just because these protections are in place, or things change in terms of the law, doesn't mean that landlords might not still abuse the system, or that people don't actually know what their rights are. And so I see one of the line items, the one that is legal for the category of public services, was a tenants' rights program. And the agency had asked for about $270,000 to fund it. And I think the recommendation is about $75,000. I think that's like about a quarter of, what they requested. And I think at this time, I think this is something to really rethink and revisit. From my understanding, a lot of other cities in the East Bay and Alameda County and Contra Costa County, they're trying really hard to expand their legal services to tenants. And so I think Hayward should be doing the same effort, especially keeping in mind the federal stimulus money that you'll be discussing in the next item on this agenda, the $38 million that could be used to fully fund some of these services that right now are being slashed and or not funded at all. So that was those are my thoughts. Being able to have legal services for tenants and renters here as things change rapidly and things evolve. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised at the moment from the public. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comment on this and entertain questions and comments from council members. All right, no one, okay. Okay, Councilmember Lamnon.
As the liaison for the commission, I'll kick it off.
Oh, yes, right. Our liaison. Thank you, too, for your work.
It's very minor. It's really many kudos to the commission. It's been a great year and a tremendous amount of work. And I want to speak to a little bit about that in a minute, but also wanted to just, reappreciate the commission, congratulate them again on the award, and also appreciate Artavia Berry brought this award to the forefront and also nominated the city as an organization for the same award and was awarded that. So cheers to everybody for the really outstanding work this year. And thank you to city staff who staffs this commission as well. And so I don't have any particular questions or comments about the funding priorities. Questions I had got answered during commission deliberations. So I'll just express my inclination to support the commission's recommendations. I think the deliberations to really try to balance a huge number of priorities within the commission was exceedingly well done. And I appreciate the commission's leadership on really using that racial equity lens, even in line with what the city was doing. And in some ways before we were ready to do some things as a city organization. Similarly, we've spent some time in the commission talking about the letter that they wrote regarding racial equity and all of the incidences that happened, all of the lives lost last year, and really looking at how do we rethink public safety. And those conversations have been exceptionally helpful, at least from my own understanding, and I think will continue to play out as we continue to have that conversation at the city level. And then I just wanted to kind of circle back to Commissioner Garg's comments about priorities and goals. And I know we've struggled in the past to try and figure out how do we narrow this down? How do we communicate back to the community, the nonprofit community? How do we decide for ourselves where are these priorities? And I think it is time to think about that and to really have that hard conversation of, look, we've got a strategic action plan around homelessness coming up. We've got racial equity issues to solve in this community. We've got housing problems. We've got mental health issues that we want to get to. And so do we pick one or two of those and really focus our resources? Do we continue to have it be this broad lens and leave it all to the commission, which is kind of where we are now, with a little bit of direction around homelessness and hunger? Or do we, and if we do a much narrower focus, then what are we willing to give up? Same as the conversations we've been having about strategic planning. Do we think about, okay, well, what if we don't fund things we've traditionally funded with this money? What happens? What happens to the shelter program if we don't fund that staff member, if we don't fund something else? those are tough conversations, but I'm wondering if it's time to have them in the city, and maybe it's a joint conversation with perhaps the council members from the Homelessness and Housing Task Force with a subcommittee of the commissioners to really dig through and think about these things. So looking forward to my colleagues' thoughts on that, and thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to really congratulate and commend staff and all of the commissioners. By far, this has been the most impressive process. Typically, every year we get emails and there's people very upset and question the process. And the work shows the structure of the commission. I think every year it's just getting better and better and stronger. So thank you all for your time and commitment. I've had my share of those marathon Saturday meetings. So I know not just that day, but all the reading that occurs leading up to it. So thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your service. I do hope that the flexibility this last year of being able to meet remotely, although not under ideal circumstances, we don't want to be under this pandemic, but hopefully I think it showed that it allowed for more innovation, flexibility, and probably more participation than ever. So hopefully moving forward, we can continue that and have some type of hybrid method. In the staff report, it did mention that the ARCs were paying close attention as to how these nonprofit entities are going to continue to provide services in light of COVID. So I'm presuming that all of them met that criteria. That's why they're being recommended. But if staff can just give us a couple of examples of how some agencies have pivoted and are continuing to provide services to the most vulnerable members of our community. That's one question, and then I have more.
Sure, absolutely. One example is from the general fund. Spectrum Community Services have traditionally done food access points at certain locations. So for example, they had food site at the Hayward Senior Center, but rather than being unable to have congregate food site, they shifted gears and have partnered with Meals on Wheels to increase service delivery, as well as allowing for driving by and picking up meals. And there's several examples.
And then are nonprofits meeting like remotely, like with clients and consumers?
Yes, in the legal services realm, certainly the appointments have been made virtually where possible, or identified spaces in which social distancing can occur.
Okay. And then quickly, I also appreciate the equity lens in regard to race. And I know there's a strong desire to start collecting more data. I think that's important. That's something that our community has been raising concerns about for a long time, and not just in funding, but just across the board within the organization. So I'm really happy to see those values align and putting more of an effort towards that. There was also comments about looking at recommending the funding for the SAVE program to come out of the police department, looking at the family and education services to come out of the library budget. And then there may have been one more, but I'm definitely open to having those discussions, especially now that we have the stimulus funding. I've been pushing since I was on the Human Services Commission back in 2008-9, take 211 out of the competitive process. It took a long time to get to that point, but we're finally there. So I think we really need to look seriously at those recommendations that our commissioners are bringing forward. They are the voice of our community. I do have a concern, and I don't obviously want to get into anyone's personal information, but we do have a requirement to have a low income individual. I'm presuming at least one. Are we closely tracking that in terms of serving on this body? I think it's a HUD requirement.
On the Community Services Commission, it is a part of the broader selection process.
Okay. And then how many vacancies, do you know how many vacancies will be up in the recruitment this summer?
I don't off the top of my head. We've just had a couple shifts, so I think we have at least 2 or 3 at this point.
Okay, and then I'm also in support of Councilmember Lamnin's comments about scheduling a work session. I would like to see it be with an ad hoc committee of the Community Services Commission. Some pretty strong feelings around this, so I'll reserve that. But I do think it's time to have that fuller discussion, and also thank Councilmember Lamnin for her work on this body and staff and the commissioners again. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Andrews.
Just wanted to thank staff and congratulate the commissioners on their award. And thank you, Councilmember Lamnin, for helping with being a liaison to this great commission. And I have one question about the letter. And if someone can just highlight a little bit more about the letter that was submitted and just a little bit of a recap of how it might have impacted some of the selections here. It was a letter that was submitted from Community Services Commission.
Yeah, I can speak on behalf of the commissioners. I wonder if.
Looks like Commissioner Garg has raised her hand. So maybe if you want to bring her back over.
And Commissioner Lawrence.
Yeah.
So.
Both of them served on the subcommittee for drafting the letter.
Thank you.
So
would you like me to invite the
Yes, they are here to answer questions. So yes, please.
Go ahead. Commissioner Garg.
Hi, thank you very much. I'll answer briefly since my fellow commissioner, Alicia Lawrence, is also going to answer. As Monica pointed out, I served on the subcommittee. I would say the primary way in which some of the discussion that was communicated to council in the letter also affected the funding process was the racial equity lens, both from the community members who are served, the clients of the nonprofit, at least from the services perspective. And I think having served on the services arc for 3 years now, this was the first time we talked sort of openly about the staffing, and we asked specific questions about the staffing of the nonprofits themselves. And several of the nonprofits are actually quite open about where they are today and what their long-term plan is in the future to have a more representative staff of the community they serve. And from my perspective, particularly for smaller grants like this, it's really important to be serving minority-led organizations. There's a lot of, particularly in the last year, there's been a lot of discussion about how philanthropic organizations sometimes don't necessarily, equitably fund minority-led organizations. So that's, I think, one of the topics that was a significant topic of discussion, at least in the services arc.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lawrence, did you also want to speak?
Yeah, so I served on the arts and music, and we definitely were thoughtful of how we were funding some of the programs, and then the questions that we were asking of the agencies regarding race and equity and who their participants are and what they are doing to ensure that the demographics that they are serving and the participants are racially diverse. And some of them, kind of pushing on them a little bit just to make sure that they are aware that that is something that is a value of this commission, and that something that we will be paying extra attention to moving forward. And so no one was penalized, but we definitely sort of put that in everyone's ear that this is something that is important to us as a commission. And so we really want you all to be working towards this in the future to ensure that your programming and your participants that you are also applying this racial equity lens to your agency and your programming and your methods of like recruiting participants. And I think, we were in that regard also very excited to see the Russell City Blues Juneteenth Festival as a program for us to consider, and very excited to fund that program, not just because it's about Juneteenth, and not just because it is a program related to the Black African American experience, but also because the person who presented was so prepared to make accommodations if he couldn't do in live the in live scope that he wanted to do, and really on top of all of the planning points when we met with him earlier in the year, where things were still very dicey about like, could things be in person? Could they not? So, that was something that that was very, very important to us. If you have more specific questions, Council Member Andrews, about the letter, Arti and I, again, we both served on the subcommittee that drafted the letter. So we are happy to answer any of those questions if you have more specifics.
Mm-hmm. No, I just wanted to allow the public to have more insight into the letter. It was a bold statement, and I really appreciated it. And it definitely informs me on how I want to operate on council. So I definitely appreciate your time. And I know ad hoc committees are not easy to coordinate, and so to have something so great come out of it, I just wanted to appreciate. Just send my appreciation to you both and to the rest of that committee. And I'm very curious to see how the Russell City Festival will happen virtually. I was very ecstatic to hear that you guys are interested in doing something particularly for Juneteenth and Russell City. So thank you for your time on that.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Andrews, Commissioner Berry also contributed to the letter, and it looks like she has something else she'd like to add.
Okay. Commissioner Berry?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Thank you all for your time tonight. I will not reiterate what my two colleagues just said. I will just add to it. One, I co-signed everything that they said. And two, just to add a little bit more context, in addition to what you heard just now, we also were very fortunate to go through as a commission racial equity training that Monica provided for us to get a deeper understanding of what that lens looks like. So we've all made that commitment, not to just talk the talk, but to be a part of the training and development of our own sensibilities as it relates to the issue. And in addition, we as a commission also determined that it made sense for us to hear a standing report every month, which is really sort of a cross collaboration between our work and the work of the community. I'm gonna call the committee's name wrong, but it's the committee that's working with the police department. To have standing updates so that we can be in sync with our colleagues across other commissions in terms of progressing the work, not only of the Community Services Commission, but of racial equity, of community safety and policing. And the last thing I'll say is I'm super proud to have served on that ad hoc committee, but also super proud of my colleagues who also currently serve on another committee to inform some of the work we're doing around public safety. So thank you to all of my colleagues on the commission for your service. It's an honor to be here, especially through this pandemic and through this time where we're kind of having this awakening around issues of racial equity. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Andrews. Okay, so we'll move on to Commissioner Wahab. Commissioner. Okay, actually, Mayor Pro Tem Wahab. Sorry, I really demoted. I really like.
No worries. Today we're all messing up the names.
I do want to just say I really do appreciate basically every commissioner that spoke tonight. And I also want to thank all the commissioners that are not necessarily speaking tonight, but I know you guys have done a lot of work to make the proper recommendations. I also want to thank our city clerk, primarily just because we have a robust set of commissioners on the different commissions we have. I have seen diversity being a prime focus as well as skill set. And I think that that is something that I'm very, very happy about. So looking forward to our next set of interviews for new commissioners as well. With the Community Services Commission, I do want to highlight to the public that this is a commission that is largely made up of just everyday residents in Hayward. You have different viewpoints. You have some conservative thoughts, some liberal thoughts, some very, different backgrounds. You have, doctors, teachers, parents, you name it, you have it on that commission. It's a very diverse commission. So they tend to talk a lot as to what's the pros and what's the cons. And I think that each year we do see significant improvements as to not only the recommendations, but then also how they do stuff. I remember very early on when I first started to see this, my frustration was more that it looked like we were funding, things that, the impact may be limited in the city. So I'm actually very, very impressed with the recommendations you guys have on this PDF in particular. And the fact that, it's very much in line with a lot of what we're trying to do on the city council, from housing and homelessness to the legal services, as well as economic development, infrastructure, and then arts and music, food security, youth education, and much more. So I really just want to appreciate all the work that you guys did there. I will also say that because of COVID and because of so many other things, there are so many nonprofits that are relying on the funds here. And obviously we cannot pay as much as is requested by each of these nonprofits, the amount that they want, even if we wanted to. And that's the concern I have. So I know it's a difficult decision. I also know it's very difficult to say no, even though, the program's good, it's being well run, and so much more. So I do see the certain programs have received less funding than originally requested. I'm hoping that our council can, especially with COVID funds, which is going to be our next item, if we can highlight some of the things that are here and see if we can kind of meet the request over the recommendation. I personally do agree that housing to me will be a priority. I know we have the moratorium. Some people, I will tell the public, are already asking that the moratorium be lifted. I'm not necessarily in support of that just yet. I do want to make sure that our priority is to ensure that people get housing, stay housed, and then definitely have legal services as to how do they make their back payments, right? That's the big elephant in the room that nobody seems to talk about when we're discussing moratoriums. So I do want to highlight that. I also really want to highlight isolation. Primarily, isolation is a root cause of a lot of dysfunction in our society. And I think that we're seeing it more and more. COVID, is one aspect of it. And I think we've all kind of had our COVID moment, if you will, where we did not like how things are going. But there are people that are isolated because of physical issues or other issues. And I do want to highlight that. So programs, for example, like Meals on Wheels is very important, especially to our senior community. Visiting some of these encampments, I will also highlight that our senior population there is also struggling. And the fact that I have been told multiple times by multiple different people on this particular tour is that people do go to bed still starving. So I do want to highlight that. It is very, very difficult to see in our community. Now, beyond that, I do want to say that we do need to focus on the root cause of society's problems. And I do think that this is very much in line with that and not the final output of a system. So the Community Services Commission recommends some of the best recommendations I've seen thus far. And we cannot blame a member of, let's say, the houseless community for bringing blight into our neighborhoods. I've heard that oftentimes. And the blame is definitely on a system that allows for, homelessness to exist without proper mental health and services that transition individuals into standing on their own 2 feet, if you will. I do want to highlight that we do need to have equal access to fully funded education, which we do not see. So I was very happy to see some of the funds going to education, as well as computer literacy, as well as just being able to, we saw the digital divide. So this is a big step forward. I also want to highlight that even the camps counselors that called in, I think that, what they're asking for is very much, something I'd support too, if we can see something like that. But the next thing is that the safety nets that, I often discuss, I think that this is very much in line with that. These nonprofits, these community organizations, they are pretty much offering that. It's safety nets. It's not, again, these are a small amount of money, whether we're talking about 30,000, 45,000, 28,000, some of the numbers here, very small. It makes a very small dent in our community. So hopefully we can, again, match some of the funding that is missing that I know that some of these organizations have requested for, but it is very, very difficult. So for me, I also want to highlight that, I have not heard any complaint from the community thus far. Historically, we, to Councilmember Marquez's point, we sometimes do get emails of, I'm upset that, we didn't get as much funding. You guys made very, very difficult decisions. And I do like the fact that you guys are also qualifying the organization. In the past, I've seen where, individuals are not turning in the paperwork that they actually are required to return in. They're not fulfilling their obligation in receiving the funds. So I really, really appreciate that you guys put an emphasis on that in particular, because we also need to make sure that the dollars do what they're supposed to do. So I do just want to highlight those things. Again, I really want to thank every single one of the commissioners. I know that not only on this commission, but you guys also spend a lot of time volunteering to comment and send us information in regards to a wide variety of other issues that are happening in the city. So you guys are genuinely our representatives in a lot of different areas. And I really want to thank you guys for that, whether we're talking about public safety, whether we're talking about housing or arts and so much more, and student activities and kids in general. I do want to highlight that. And then the last thing I do want to say is that if we do receive some information, I'm going to ask this of our city manager. So for example, in one of the slides, there's a point in time count as one of the bullet points for 2019. In my engagement with the command center for the homeless encampments, I shared it with them. And I do believe that it is incredibly insightful and important for the other city groups that we have internally working for the city to be able to have that data given to them. They did not have that in the past. So I do want to just highlight that sharing information and not working in silos is also a benefit to us. So for example, if our Community Services Commission does send us a letter, which they have in the past as well, to be able to share that with some of our other stakeholders within our city, just so they can understand that what we are asking for, what we are working for as a policy is very much something that the community demands. So I just want to state that I fully support our commission and their recommendations. So I have no adjustments except for the fact that I would like to see if we can kind of fund them more. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Salinas.
Yeah, this will be real short. I just wanted to thank all the commissioners. Again, fantastic job. Over the years, I think I've been pretty consistent with the recommendations that the commission has brought to us. I know there's an incredible amount of work that goes into the outreach and the selection, and of course the disbursement. I have to agree with some of the comments that have already been made. The attention on program fidelity, I think, is certainly something that we see captured in this in this cycle of funding. So thank you to staff, and yeah, I mean, every year the need is greater than the money, and so if we ever came to a point where it was reversed, we would have done a lot more good. So in short, I just wanted to thank everybody involved. Congratulations to, of course, staff that supports the CSC, and again, another great job. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an interesting discussion. This, of course, is a work session, and these will be coming back to us in a couple of weeks. But these recommendations, but I want to join in, first of all, thanking all the commissioners for their hard work, and congratulations on this award. We need to make more of a big fuss about that at some point, Madam City Manager. I'm looking at you right now. But yeah, I mean, that is really commendable. And, it makes me very proud, as the mayor, but also as a former member of the commission. That is my first assignment for the city of Hayward. Official assignment was as a member of what was then called the Citizens Advisory Commission, but basically it was the commission charged with making recommendations about how we spend our block grant gift of money from the federal government that we get every year. It was in later years that the city added its own money to augment social services. And which I'm glad that we're able to do. I mean, I actually remember the years when we did have an adequate amount of money to cover the requests, the ones that were eligible. Certain requests did not, sometimes don't meet criteria that are necessary, but those days are over, obviously. However, I would point out that when an agency makes a request, I think they probably do reach for the sky, knowing that they're probably not going to get it. And also, I think we want to use our funds to leverage. So we can't pay for everything. So often our funds augment and leverage other funding from charitable organizations, philanthropic organizations, or most of these agencies raise their own money from the community as well. I know I contribute to a number of them. So it's not just that, their budgets aren't being met because they're not getting the award that they asked for, but I know one of the criteria we always used to look at is how is this funding leveraged against other funds that the agency has. And also, I know that one of the things that we looked at in the past was how well do the agencies requesting the funding or organizations requesting the funding collaborate and partner with other agencies serving the community. And so those are things that I think we have areas we've made a lot of progress on over the years in encouraging those things. And so I do certainly the racial equity lens was long needed, and I very much thank the commission for their work in bringing this to us. And I know it is very consistent with the goals that we as a council have set for the city too. So I think we're very much in sync. And I was pleased also to see the Russell City request, because I know that we had looked at 2019 as being the last year that the Russell City Blues Festival, as it had been known from its inception about 20 years earlier, was going to be was going to be an event in 2019 before COVID, before anybody ever heard of COVID, because of some of the funding situation that the organization itself had. But I strongly support us continuing to recognize Russell City and its blues tradition. And I'm very much looking forward to this event. And finally, I have to bring this up because I've always been a bit of a champion. Well, I do want to say I agree with the comments made by several council members that when we get to the next item, which is a discussion of the stimulus funding, that's where we can look at some of this and say, are there unmet needs here that we can use the stimulus funding for? And then finally, I'm just going to have to ask about the Hayward Municipal Band. I noticed that the request was not funded, but also I think it might not even be the only one. Obviously they received a grant last year were not able to use it since they were not able to have their summer concerts. So can you give me any information? I mean, we didn't hear from them this year, and I usually do. So
yes, so we've been the Hayward Municipal Band is working with the Hayward Area Historical Society as their fiscal sponsor, and we've been in conversation with them just to discuss because there wasn't an ability to provide a concert for this fiscal year, then that funding would be carried forward, and then so there's no new funding award for fiscal year 2022.
But they do have access, if they are able to have concerts this summer, to that funding that was awarded last year?
For this current fiscal year, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, we will look forward to getting...
we actually have another piece of the presentation. There's still...
Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. Yes, we're not done, are we? All right.
Councilmember Andrews needs to recuse herself, and I'll text you.
Sorry.
We're done.
It's just a small sliver of the presentation left, I promise.
Okay.
Right. All right, and then for the community development block grant piece, I will go through these pretty quickly, but just wanted to highlight from the funds we receive from HUD, we are allowed to use up to 15% to allocate for public services. And so this is an allotment of 15%. And just wanted to call out that we have a new agency that we're funding with CDBG funds this year, and that's A1 Community Housing Services. It's the first time they're being funded through entitlement funds. We first started funding them with emergency funds, but they had also previously applied and not received funding. So staff's been trying to work with applicants who are newer to ensure that they don't give up and they continue. And similar in that regard for economic development and infrastructure, you'll note that Central Community Partners is also a new agency. They applied for the first time either, I believe, in 2019 for fiscal year 2020, and at that time didn't get recommended for funding, but staff's been working with them to help them with their application, and now they've been able to be recommended for funding. So just wanted to uplift some of those new agencies. And then, of course, it's important to note that this is the beginning of our public comment period. It will extend through May 6th and include our next City Council meeting, the public hearing. That would be on April 27th, in which Council will make and vote on funding recommendations and approve our 2022 annual action plan. And then we will then collect any feedback, integrate it into our annual action plan, and submit that to HUD for approval. And so if there are any questions or comments from the public about the CDBG portion, and then as well for council.
All right, and I'm again, okay, I don't see any questions or hands raised from attendees. So I'll open public comments. Are there any attendees who wish to make a public comment? Seeing none, I'll close that and go to council questions and comments. And Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mary. I just really wanted to appreciate Monica and her team. I won't just, I can disclose, but that's not the point of why I'm making this comment. But I've had conversations with numerous nonprofits that just feel overwhelmed about the application process. And these are conversations that started years ago. So it's really, really exciting to see they're now being recommended for funding. So thank you for pointing that out. I think in the staff report, I think the number was 9 new agencies are being funded this year. And that's just really impressive to know that staff does not give up and is able to provide that technical assistance, because these agencies are doing great work, but the application process can be very, very overwhelming, and the requirement for an audit, and the list goes on and on. So thank you so much for not giving up on these providers. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Any other council comments, questions? All right, with that, I don't see any other hands raised. Thank you very much to the entire team, our staff members and our commission members who are here with us tonight. And we will look forward to seeing you again on April 27th, right? That was the date, yeah, April 27th.
And, when Councilmember Andrews is rejoining us, she just needs to also announce what her conflict was. She forgot to do that before she logged off. So just make sure we do that when she gets back on.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
I think, yes, there she is. Councilmember Andrews, would you like to state what your conflict reason why you left us for that last part?
Yes, I was on the Downtown Streets Team Hayward Advisory Council, and it was less than a year ago, so I had to recuse myself from that item.
All right, thank you for that. And then we are now ready to move on to item number 6, which is another work session. And this is regarding stimulus funding expenditure plan. And we are being asked to provide feedback on a proposed expenditure framework for the stimulus funding that we expect to be receiving from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 to address the economic and fiscal impacts of the COVID crisis in the city of Hayward. And this time, I'm pretty certain we are going to start with the city manager, Ms. McAdoo.
That is correct. And I thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to walk through the presentation. We have a brief presentation. Really tonight is to start the conversation about the stimulus package and the funding that Hayward will receive. I wanted to just acknowledge our congressional delegation. I know that all of them were supportive of this historic legislation. If you're not aware, this is actually the first time ever in history that local governments have received a direct relief aid package like this. And so very unique. Obviously, the last year has been very unique for all of us. And so I'm incredibly grateful. This will help us do a lot of really great things as our community recovers and as our organization recovers. So I'm happy to have a positive agenda item for the evening. I think both of these were very positive, but this one in particular, I'm pleased to share with the council. So let me share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to just walk through an overview of the America Rescue Plan Act of 2021, or ARPA. This legislation was signed into law by the president on March 11th. It provides about $1.9 trillion in economic stimulus to address impacts due to the COVID crisis. Of that, $65 billion is direct federal relief to cities to address the economic and fiscal impacts of COVID. For the city of Hayward, we anticipate receiving approximately $38 million in one-time local relief. Again, this is one-time funds. We, based on the way that the funding is allocated, 19 million of that, or about 50%, will be transmitted to the city within 30 to 60 days. This is a little different because we are a CDBG recipient city, so we already have direct funding lines to the federal government, so they're able to get the money to us much faster. Cities that do not receive CDBG entitlement grants will have to wait a significant amount longer until the state actually distributes their funding. So very fortunate that we'll be able to start using these dollars relatively quickly once the council approves a funding plan. The second sort of tranche of funding, the additional, the remaining 19 million, will come within 12 months. They're still sort of finalizing the numbers. So what that dollar amount ends up being, it may be, a little bit less than 38 million, a little bit more, but right around that dollar figure. And the great thing is these funds are very flexible, and the goal is simply to address city needs that are associated with the COVID-19 crisis, and they must be expended by December of 2024. The legislation did explicitly indicate that the funding funding cannot be spent on pensions or pension-related obligations. So that is just one thing that was very specifically called out in the legislation. So there are a number of allowable uses that are, again, very broad. Generally, the funds can be used to cover expenses related to the response to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts. We can respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency. This allows the city to provide up to $13 an hour to eligible local workers or to provide grants to other employers in the city that have eligible essential workers. We can recover local government revenue losses due to COVID-19 to allow for continued service provision. This is relative to the revenues collected in the most recent fiscal year, which is prior to the emergency. And so we'll measure the year against which you measure lost revenue is the most recent full fiscal year prior to the COVID-19 emergency. So that is a good baseline year for us. And then another allowable use is to make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. There is a certification that is very, as we understand it, very simple, probably as simple as the council adopting a resolution saying that we had a loss of revenue during the COVID-19 crisis, therefore, please send us the money. And so we'll probably bring that certification and resolution to the council when we come back on April 27th for further discussion of this plan. The funds must be used again by December 31st of 2024. I think I mentioned we'll receive the funds directly from the U.S. Treasury, and then others will receive their distribution through the state based on their population. And then counties will receive an allocation as well, and that will be per capita. Councilmember Lamden actually pointed out, and we'll be watching this closely, that the Board of Supervisors is planning to have a work session on how to use some of these funds to address some of the critical issues we've all been talking about: mental health, homelessness. So I know city staff will be participating and weighing in during that work session on hopefully being able to leverage some of those additional dollars from the county as well. And then we do have to provide periodic reports to the Treasury Department on how we are spending the dollars. So there are a lot of other benefits in the legislation, and I think this is important for the council to pay attention to, so we can maximize the dollars that we have and put them towards areas where entities or individuals are not receiving dollars from another source. So I think just wanted to highlight some of these where there is the direct fiscal payments of $1,400 per person with income eligibility up to $80,000. And then there will be increases and extensions of the Earned Income Dependent Care and Child Tax Credit. There will be an employee retention credit and paid leave credit. And then state and local governments will be eligible for the Corona Relief Act paid leave reimbursable tax credit beginning March 31st of 2021. There is an extension for the additional unemployment benefits. There will be additional increase in the payroll protection funding. It closes March 31st, included nonprofit eligibility. There is a specific restaurant relief and revitalization fund, which is going to be very important for our restaurant community. So we'll be encouraging and trying to help those restaurants apply for those funds. And then funding for shuttered venue operators. So this is like concert halls, stadiums, things like that. And then also the legislation extends increases to SNAP and the WIC programs. So as a staff team, we worked to kind of identify where are the big Hayward impacts and areas of need that we've seen over the past year, and how can we start to think about the allocation of this funding. So obviously illness and death, specifically disparate impacts on communities of color as a result of COVID-19. We've seen a tremendous amount of temporary and permanent business closures, a loss of jobs, housing instability, homelessness, increased crime, blight, and illegal dumping, a substantial decrease in our city revenue and reduction in reserves, which then impacts our ability to provide services to the community. We are then forced to look at service reductions if we don't have the revenue to provide those. The financial concessions and furloughs that our employees provided last year to help us make sure that we didn't burn through too many of the city's reserves or savings account. The increased need for technological support for remote work transition, and then just really, I think what we've all experienced, which is very intense expectations of addressing the emergency needs. And we've seen that a very quick turnaround. A city I don't think I've ever seen in my 20 years in local government, local governments, especially Hayward in particular, setting up so many new programs in such a short period of time. And I think that's, there's just a sense of fatigue and exhaustion from our employees. And I just want to acknowledge how hard everyone has been working over the last year. So we've basically, in thinking about the expenditure plan, just creating sort of a broad framework to start the discussion with the council tonight. Again, about $38 million of total funding. And what we're recommending is that we look at splitting the funding into two major expenditure categories, and then having a discussion with the council about what kinds of programs and projects you might want to see under those categories. And generally looking at a range of somewhere between $15 to $25 million of allocation between the two categories, depending on the projects that the council ultimately selects to include in there. So the two categories would be community safety and economic recovery, where we really would be prioritizing direct external and community needs. And then the second category would be fiscal recovery and stabilizing city operations. And so here's where we would be really targeting internal fiscal needs so that we can ensure we're continuing to provide community services, also making adjustments to our internal operations to allow for return to work safely, and to allow city operations like the library and other public facing counters to buy the equipment that they need to transition into kind of a new work environment. We know that once folks do return to work, that it won't be normal, it won't be business as usual. And so there's a lot of things that we've been talking about, particularly I think the council has been talking about the desire to continue the virtual meeting environment when we return to the council chambers. And so there's some infrastructure upgrades and technology improvements we need to make to the council chambers to be able to do that and to accommodate that. And so our current plan is to think about making those improvements during the August recess and then returning to in-person meetings, sort of hybrid in-person meetings starting in September of this year. So we created some general guidelines to help us and the council and city staff identify specific projects that would fall into this expenditure plan framework. Obviously, the projects would have to fall into the established categories of the legislation. The projects would need to address a need created due to the COVID crisis, something that would meet multiple public purposes or is cross-departmental in nature. It fills a funding gap or leverages other sources of funding where we can use it as matching funds for something else. Something that helps create more sustainable sources of funding. So trying to create programs or funds where they're sort of revolving, where we can leverage those funds for a longer term to provide more benefit to the community. And then looking at expenditures that really are ineligible or unlikely to be funded through other sources of funds. And I think that's critical when we look at what else is coming through that stimulus package and what else the county might be providing and the state might be providing through these funds, and trying to really target our funds through to those uses. And it has to be projects and programs that can be expended by December of 2024 and that can be implemented with existing or one-time temporary or contract staff. I want to just reemphasize these are one-time funds, so I want to be very careful about creating new ongoing expenses, staffing, or programs with these funds. This really should be sort of one-time in nature expenses. So here's just under each of the two categories of community safety and economic recovery, and then the fiscal recovery and stabilizing city operations, we just created some categories of potential programs that we might want to consider. So under this, the community safety and economic recovery, we've got economic development and small business recovery, housing and homelessness programs, funding for community and nonprofit programs. Obviously, we heard a lot of need tonight in the prior presentation. Enhanced cleanup and maintenance, since we had to really reduce those services during the pandemic. And then looking at maybe using some of this funding to help implement the community policy innovation and public safety workshop recommendations that are going to be coming forward to council. In the second category, under fiscal recovery and stabilizing city operations, really replenishing the loss of past and projected city revenues and the associated city reserve funding that we had, funding to eliminate furloughs and staffing reductions that we've had to make during the pandemic. And then, as I mentioned, investing in technology needed to return to work safely and facilitate continued remote participation. And then building in infrastructure investments where we can maintain city operations and services in the post-COVID environment. So tonight, we really just want to have this preliminary conversation, hear from the council about the framework that we've laid out, talk and hear from the council about, and the public also. Is the first time that I think the community has seen this framework. Just hearing more about what programs or projects in specific the council really wants us to focus on. Are there higher priority items than others? Because then that'll help us as we start to divvy up the funding in those categories to really think about which categories do we put more funding towards. So following this discussion this evening, we'll continue to have more discussions internally. We'll probably try to do some community outreach around this and then return for council review and approval of the plan along with the resolution expressing the needs for the funds on April 27th. And then we'll schedule 6-month reviews of the expenditure plan. So this evening, we will do public comment and then followed by council questions and comment in the work session format. So I will stop sharing and thank you.
All right. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to go right ahead and open public comment on this item. And I do see we have some speaker requests. So we'll go right into that. And the first one looks like Lacey Amadei.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you.
So I just wanted to speak to the preliminary suggestion that the stimulus dollars could go towards the implementation of the community public safety workshop recommendations. And I just wanted to speak to that point. I just wanted to let you all know, and I've heard you say in prior meetings that everyone is very eager for there to be action on the front of the policy innovation workshops. I do want to remind you all that in deciding how to fund those projects, and you all do decide, I just want to communicate to you all that if all of that comes from these stimulus dollars, it could create an impression in the eye of the public that there isn't a serious ongoing commitment to reimagining community safety. It was pretty heartening that, after a long time of advocacy from, movements everywhere, that some of you even said that you were starting to embrace the idea of reimagining community safety. That's great news. I just want to urge you that going forward with these stimulus dollars, with decisions about how we will put these recommendations in place, I really want to urge you all to look for a way, especially with funding, because it's so powerful when you choose to fund something, to communicate to the public that you are committed to that being an ongoing commitment. And that probably whatever comes from these workshops is only going to be the start, that there will probably be a growth in this area as we think of how we can keep all of our citizens safe. So I just really want to, I look forward to hearing what you have to say and your ideas. And I know this is first discussion, but I just really want to communicate to you all that, the kind of people that I am in touch with, there's a lot of skepticism about the commitment from the city, in part because of how long this process has taken. And I know that even when we hear, from the workshop participants, it's probably going to, be a very long journey until we get to the place that we need to be. So I just want to urge you all to think about that when making funding decisions, to really communicate to the community that you are invested, not in a one-time, quick funding project, but that this is going to be an ongoing commitment, and for it to be, in some way, a permanent line item on the budget, so we can really feel that we have your support for that concept. Thank you.
Thank you. Next looks like Suzanne Phyllis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Suzanne Phyllis, and I'm a 27-year Hayward resident, an 18-year employee of the City Hayward, and a proud representative for the hundreds of city workers as the SEIU Clerical Chapter President. I'm here today to urge the city to take advantage of the unique opportunity the federal ARPA money gives us to create a just recovery, a recovery that reinvests in services for the community and reinvests in the workforce that provides those services. The current plan from the city manager is a forward-looking plan that intends to prioritize the needs of the community on one hand and the needs of the city government on the other, eliminating furloughs and restoring staffing. We support those intentions, but we want to remind the city that in addition to maintaining and expanding city operations and services, we need to make whole those city workers who absorbed furloughs when things were at their worst. Many of our workers were unable to work from home and continue to serve the community as essential workers, even at the risk of their own health and safety. Many had to use vacation and sick leave hours to cover their shifts when they had to stay home to care for children. And many had to spend their own money to purchase office furniture and supplies and upgrade their internet connectivity to make working from home possible. We urge the council to use this one-time money to focus on providing services for the community and doing right by the city workers who provide those services. Please take this opportunity to use the ARPA funds to help your entire community. Please respect us, protect us, and invest in us. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. And then we have Saad Mohammed.
Council, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Thank you all for presenting a very cohesive plan to the community to consider and the council to consider. Just want to, I'm a field representative with SIU 10-1 representing the clerical and maintenance chapters. And I just want to echo what Suzanne says. I agree. The city manager has developed a very forward-looking plan, and many of the components speak to some of the things we're discussing tonight, I and Suzanne. And some of the concerns Suzanne is speaking from come from many of the members who've responded to this agenda item over emails and things like that. So she's one of many voices. I see the areas of concern with the furloughs. I see the areas with the FFCRA. I know that the city made some decisions to resist continuing FFCRA previously. We want to make sure the city, would desire to opt in, and it looks like from the plan that's the case. To the continuing, dollars for the expanded FMLA as it relates to childcare. And when I look at the document, I do see a lot about city infrastructure is just in an express, intentional fashion. We don't necessarily see the next steps, but that's part of a framework plan. So we just want to urge the council to consider the losses of employees as well. And that those services that have been reduced or those positions that have been frozen as it affects, many of the freezing positions affects the delivery of service. So we would want the city council to consider restoration of that as well. And lastly, that basically is the last piece where it speaks to the understaffing issue in the different departments where it's, a high concern, has been that way for many years. I won't go into specific departments because, we do echo the community in terms of some, the needs of the community are the needs of your employees who are members of the community. So we get those needs as well. But as we talk about HUD and the parks, which, HARD is very important to us as well at SEIU, looking at the community as a whole, which includes the employees of the city of Hayward. So I really thank you for the forward thinking plan. And we would like the council to consider those specific initiatives as it relates to losses endured by your employees.
Thank you. I'm echoing, but Commissioner Garg. Or, well, yes, Ms. Garg.
Yes. Hi. Thank you very much for recognizing me. I actually am not going to speak wearing my commissioner hat, but I actually wanted to just share two comments with the council. First is just as a resident of Hayward who has interacted frequently with city staff, and as a former federal government employee who was once subject to furloughs, I don't have an opinion on sort of the specific packages, but I just want to say as a resident, as a taxpayer, I very much support making sure that the members of our city staff are, made whole, are recognized for the work that they've done. I know that the staff has been taking pay cuts in the past year, and I'm, just nonetheless, they've gone above and beyond. So I'm just saying that, offering that as a resident and as a former government employee who has experience for those in the past. So I just want to express my support for city staff. The other comment I want to make is as a member of the Policy Innovation Workshop, and, I definitely agree with the concerns about making sure that these are not one-time, that any policy recommendations that are adopted from the workshop are not one-time adoptions. I also, though, I think many of us, I'm only speaking for myself, but are excited that this stimulus funding provides an opportunity to potentially put several different recommendations into practice and potentially test out which ones are most successful. So I encourage council to sort of think about the balance of what we can do with this unique funding opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't see any other hands raised from the public. If there are no other, yep, there is another. Blake Huntsman.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me to speak, and council, and it's good to see you, Ms. McAdoo. My name is Blake Huntsman. I'm East Bay Field Rep for SEIU, and just piggybacking on what's been shared by Suzanne and Saad and previous commissioner that spoke, labor works collaboratively with any entity. And it's important, especially in these unprecedented times where people were working and getting sick, but people were also damaged, by the economic impacts that we all experience. It's important that we don't just give lip service to essential workers. It's important that we acknowledge the fact that everybody struggled through this, and your staff and our members worked collaboratively to continue operations and to do their share to make the city remain operable, and it's important that they be made whole. It's only fair, especially with this unique opportunity. These same members, and I will say this, they showed up, they phone banked, they did some of everything to make sure that an administration is in place that actually put this stimulus package forward, that Congress was in place that could move this. So, in saying all these things, this is, we look forward to continue to work collaboratively to be the best partners that we can be. And we would ask and urge you to make your workers whole. It's the right thing to do. Thank you for letting me have my say.
Thank you. And I will also call now on another one of our community services commissioners, Ms. Barry. Barry.
There we go. Good evening. Just a couple comments here. One, just words of support for all city employees that held us together through such a crazy crisis. Oh my God, just thinking back on it makes me a little nervous. But super grateful, and a word of support there. Also want to reiterate comments that were made much earlier in our work session tonight around the gap that we see in our safety nets. We certainly did the best we could with what we had, but there are organizations that could really leverage additional support in really meaningful ways throughout the city of Hayward. And so urge the council to do consider those opportunities. And right alongside that, also want to encourage us to consider innovative programs, new programs that have unique ways of looking at our concerns and solving them. We saw a number of programs that were just new, exciting, innovative, and we just didn't have the dollars. Even though we would not be able to do ongoing support with this, certainly seed funding for new innovation would set some of those programs up for long-term success in our communities. I'm thinking specifically about human trafficking that is exploding here in Hayward. There's some really, really great work going on in our community to help address that, along with some one-time infrastructure requests that would go a long way for providing safety nets and support for some of the most vulnerable people in our communities, including our disabled community, as well as one insight that I had in the process was around boys and that are also surviving trafficking, and they're often unseen. There's some really great things happening right here in our own city where a one-time investment would set those innovations up for long-term success. So I wanted to just give voice to those things as well while I had the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I am not seeing any more hands right now, so I will close public comment and we'll go to council for questions and comments. Probably mostly comments, I bet, but we'll see. And we will start with Councilmember Wahab.
Thank you. To our city manager, I do have a question for you. I know maybe this time last year, you had to make the tough decision to lay off some employees. Do you have the number of employees that were laid off that were not protected by the unions?
So those were temporary employees that we had been leveraging through temp agencies or retirees who we had hired back to help with special projects. So we do have that list. And, obviously, as we're looking to reinitiate services, we want to make sure that all of our full-time, employees that are covered by bargaining groups return to work first, and then looking at where are the gaps still in service and making sure that we can rehire those positions to help support the workload.
Okay. Do you have a rough estimate of the number?
I think it was somewhere in the 50 to 60 range, potentially, in terms of temporary employees and retirees that were in that category.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to make my comments pretty brief. Number one, I did want to thank all the callers and those individuals that have, called in and emailed and kind of also just checked in with me to see, kind of convey their opinions and thoughts. Definitely speaking from my heart, I'd first like to thank our staff for helping us to stay somewhat fiscally healthy when things were uncertain. We obviously had to, ask everybody to kind of make concessions very early on, primarily just because we did not know what COVID would have as an impact on our city. So bracing for the worst, if you will. And I'm glad that we were able to bounce back, and hopefully I think it's going to be a long bounce back, but it's going to happen. So I do just want to state that. And I do want this to come back to us in a more specific way. And the reason why I say that is because I was a little surprised to see some items here. And I don't know if you're, when we look at them, if it's ranked in a certain order. If that's the case, that makes me have more comments, but I'll leave it as is. So again, I'd like to make every employee that took a concession whole. So primarily I want to do that. That is number one. So our staff with HAME, HPMU, IFPTE, SEIU, and of course our firefighters, anybody that took a COLA deferral or a furlough or some version of this, I would like to make them whole for this year, this past year. So that's number one. And, at the same time, I'd also like to have staff be given hazard pay for the work that they've done, that especially those individuals that were exposed daily. Several people weren't able to take their COVID shots. Some people weren't able to get PPE equipment. This was a long journey, right? And I remember all the specific areas that, obviously we were limited in a lot of ways. So were nurses that were dealing with this and things like that. So I definitely want to talk about hazard pay and see what we can do for our staff there. Then I would like to have our reserves that were depleted to be brought back to the whole at 20% of our general fund. That is a significant priority for me. I know I keep talking about it, so I do want to highlight that. So once we as a city and our budget is whole, that's priority number one. So staff and then our reserves and just, regular funds. I want that to be priority number one. Priority number two is a lot of the city services and, the areas that we've kind of lacked to be the second priority. So maintenance, we have so many complaints about kind of just the filth that we see within the city. So I definitely want to see if we can do kind of like I'm going to call it a tiger team to do 1 week of just nonstop, just cleaning everywhere that we can see, because that is also a public health hazard, in my opinion. And then I will say homelessness and housing is right there as well. It's going to take time to provide housing and services and so forth. And I know that's a bigger lift, but I do think that it's incredibly important because we see a rise in our homeless count. I think it's going to continue to rise, especially if tenants are, the moratoriums are lifted. That's a significant concern as well. So I definitely want some funds to also be allocated for housing overall. And this includes basically legal services, property owners, and both commercial and residential to be able to be, keep being housed or, their business ready to go. Many of these businesses have been closed, but they've been working with their landlords. So I definitely want to make sure that property owners are able to keep their property, again, both commercial and residential. So we can talk about the details as it comes forward. I definitely want to also focus on just infrastructure. I do think is important. So water, sewage, broadband infrastructure. We saw a huge digital divide. It was one of the items that I saw that our Community Services Commission talked a little bit about. I think that is something that I've been working on personally as well. So whatever we can do to make sure that people have 21st century technology to also get the jobs and so forth. So that, and then a chunk reserved for businesses and employees in the city. And this is employees in the city, not for the city. So I just want to make that distinction, especially around those businesses that were heavily impacted. Childcare completely wiped away, right? We saw those businesses completely just disappear because you can't send your kid to childcare at that point in time, right? Because of the COVID situation. So I just want to take a look at some of our small businesses in particular. So 25 and under, they're the ones that are hurting the most. They're also the ones that are, the mom and pop businesses. They're the immigrant businesses. They're a first-time business owner. They are struggling to get the type of assistance that, and they don't have the reserves financially to get back and ready and in shape. So I just want to prioritize them before we prioritize anything else. And then as far as the excess, because I will say this is a good chunk of money that we could actually fulfill our dreams on council. So I do want to highlight some things like that. The down payment assistance for our, like I said, I've always wanted it to be residents and employees together. I think that could be top priority to get people housed. I know that when I spoke to some of the union members more recently in the last month, and I know I shared this with to our city manager just this week, I know that is of interest. including the tax defaulted properties. If we can have a robust program around that. I know for those of us that serve on the Homeless and Housing Task Force, we're limited in what we can do on that second phase. I know we did a lot of the safety nets for rental assistance, as well as rent control and tenant protections and so forth. But that second phase of getting renters potentially to be able to purchase their first home has been difficult because of the lack of funds. So if we can get a small segment specifically to get those programs up and running, I think that would be great. And then I am concerned about the implementation of the community public safety workshop recommendations. I have not seen the recommendations, so I'm going to reserve my judgment before I say anything about this in particular. But I was a little shocked to see the item here. I know we have funds, but I definitely want to see a fully vetted program that I can stand behind before I say, yes, we're going to toss money behind this particular project. Something like a 24/7 service for mental health and homelessness with a catered team of, like I said, a firefighter and a mental health worker or something like that, a paramedic in particular. I think that's important. So I do want to highlight that. And if it comes down in segments, but again, making our city whole, making staff whole, and then some of the things that I'd like to do kind of more focused on the community side of things. So those are my couple of points, and I hope it was quick. Thank you.
So I want to just, Mayor, if I could just say one thing, I want to appreciate, but $38 million actually doesn't go as far as I think everyone thinks it does. I think if just the first two items you mentioned, Councilmember Wahab, if we contemplated hazard pay and refilling the city's reserves, that would get us to $38 million right there without any money for anything else. So I think this is going to be a conversation about trade-offs that we're all going to need to balance. Where are the needs? Where is the greatest need? And kind of who, as I think we've talked about, who suffered the most during the pandemic and who do we need to help the most? And I think that's been our philosophy throughout. And so I just before the rest of the council gets, I just want to put some framing around $38 million isn't as much as we all think it is. So it seems like a lot, but yeah. So anyway.
And I appreciate those comments. And I will say that this is my wish list. I think that the top two is my biggest priorities. But I also will say that if this is brought back, and that's why I asked that it be brought back in a specific manner, even if we were to talk about percentages, right? Having a certain percentage of this $38 million, let's say, whether it's 50% allocated internally, meaning the city whole, some of the services that we want to do, our employees, so forth. And then the other 50% outward facing. There has to be some type of specific manner that this should come into.
Bring that back on the 27th.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And I don't think that one work session is going to cut it. So this is, again, my wish list at a very high level. So my 2 cents. Thank you.
I was going to say lots of priorities there, but okay. So we will move on to Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're muted.
Okay, hear me now. Sorry. Okay. So thank you to staff. Thank you to our congressional representatives, our lobbyists, everyone that has made this possible. And I think a caller talked about phone banking, people that are active in democracy, which selected these individuals that landed on this decision. And it is historic, the fact that money is trickling down to local government. So I just want to thank everybody involved with that. I would like to focus on what I like to consider low-hanging fruits. I think, we definitely will have consensus on the fact that the city of Hayward has been leaders with regard to the hotline, the COVID testing, the food distribution, the rent relief. The list goes on and on in terms of all of the initiatives that were launched in a very, very rapid, fast-paced period of time. And I just want to acknowledge all of our amazing staff, the leadership team, everybody that made that possible. It's been a very challenging year, and there is a lot of fatigue. So I think I feel confident that we will have consensus on making our employees whole. And I also want to be clear, not every group gave a concession. The majority of our employees did. And those that did, I think we need to ensure that they receive those funds back. So hopefully we have consensus on that. And I don't want us to delay that decision when we get that money. I think that's an easy one that we can fund right away. I do agree with Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Wahab that one work session is not going to cut it. I know for me, I really want to engage the public in this discussion as well. So whether that's a Saturday work session, 2 options to provide people flexibility to weigh in, or if we could do a survey, but something to just engage the pulse of the community. I also want to hear back from staff in regard to leveraging county dollars. There's a huge need to address the unsheltered population, mental health services in our community. I don't know exactly what is occurring, but we've seen a huge uptake in individuals struggling with mental health issues in encampments, roaming our streets. There's encampments popping up everywhere, and it's really, really unfortunate. And we do need to partner with the county and surrounding cities to address that. So any way that we can leverage dollars to maximize that, I'm definitely interested in that. In regard to police reform, I do think that there's going to be funding available to do pilot projects to see what works. We have all these great ideas. We don't have the recommendations quite yet, but we have a sense of what the community would like to see and what that input's going to be. So I think there is an opportunity to be innovative. I also agree with all the housing issues. We are going to have to increase funding for legal services. That's going to be key. Once the moratoriums lift, we want to prevent further displacement in our community. And also, I wanted to ask the city manager, it was highlighted in the staff report, but just so the public is made clear that this funding cannot be used for pension obligation, correct? I think you did have that on your slide, but can you just explain to the public that we do have a policy for one-time funding in terms of how that money is allocated? I know it doesn't pertain to this specific request, but
we do have a budget policy that is in the adopted budget book, and maybe our finance director can jump on and make sure that I'm reciting it clearly. But one is to make sure that we're at the 20% reserve level for funding, and then to look at funding the city's unfunded liabilities. Unfortunately, with this one-time money, we won't be able to do that. So then it goes down to looking at other sort of high priority one-time infrastructure or projects that are not going to create an ongoing obligation. Did I generally capture that correct, Dustin? Okay, good. So that's the general framework for the policy that the council had previously adopted on use of one-time funds.
Okay, so that doesn't apply to this specific pot of money, but just so the public is aware moving forward, should other one-time money become available. I'm really pleased to see the issues of blight, illegal dumping, graffiti has just become a serious issue. I see it mostly in South Hayward and in parts of downtown Hayward. So definitely want to mitigate those issues. And we have, unfortunately now, a lot of vacancies in downtown Hayward and on Mission Boulevard. So I would also like to see some of the funding be used maybe for contract staff to beef up our economic development team. They're amazing, but it's a very, very small team. So if we could increase limited positions in that department to help fill up these vacancies, I think the more walkability our community becomes with filling these shops, that reduces crime, it improves blight, and it's going to be really, really important to get people active and engaged throughout all the different sections of our community. So if we can put an emphasis on that as well as rebuilding our community as a whole. And definitely, I know this is a long list, but the relief program is going to be key as well for individuals that are still struggling to pay their rent, if we could provide more support in that area as well. And I will stop there because I think we can all talk about this endlessly, but there's a great opportunity, but we are going to have to focus, as the city manager said, on the trade-offs.
And just on the rent relief program, there are now dedicated state and county funds for rent relief. So I think what we've been thinking about is more sort of helping with more mortgage assistance in some sort of revolving loan fashion, so people don't have to go through a foreclosure process if they're facing that. And then also, as a couple of you had mentioned, legal services to help tenants and mediation.
And so when this comes back to us, I know it's going to require a lot from staff, but if we can be briefed on other funding streams, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want us to maximize these dollars. And I don't know every possible legislation that's out there. So that's going to be key. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lamnan's next.
Thank you. It's a good point, Councilmember Marquez. I think part of the that staff, the work session that the county is going to have is that same lens of there's all this money coming in from various sources. From the county's point, they have like Measure W in addition to state dollars, federal dollars. And so this idea of how do we get our arms around all of the money that's available so that we do, as the city manager said, not duplicate, have the biggest bang for the buck, et cetera. So, so I do have one question, and then I'll get to my comments. And I concur, it would be really easy to spend this 38 million like 20 times over. So I will do my best to narrow my focus. But I do have a question, which is, so is the thought for some of the community reinvestment of these dollars to be similar to the grants that we've given in the past where people apply? What's the vision for getting this money back to businesses and residents?
I think it's going to depend on the type of program. So there may be specific grants where we go and target specific business sectors and say, here we have this pot of money for this. Please connect with us and really sort of doing more direct outreach. You know, I think what, like we talked about is like there's a whole fund in the stimulus package for restaurants. So do we then target our economic development dollars at other business sectors that may have been impacted? And so really looking at that. So I think, and I think it'll just depend, you know, there may be some funds where it's like, it's an open call, like, hey, come tell us if you need help. And then let's do an application process. And you know, and I think it's going to be very similar process to what we went through when we established some of these programs initially. It's like trying to figure out what makes the most sense. And is there someone who's already administering a program like this that we could just tag on to so we don't have to create the administrative infrastructure, which creates a lot of extra cost. And we'd rather just get more of the dollars out. So.
Okay. Yeah, I really appreciate that logic. And yes, I noted the broadband infrastructure need, and also was thinking about some of our own internal infrastructure backlogs, like the courtyard improvements and some of those things. Although, you know, if the federal infrastructure stimulus has legs, then again, maybe those are the dollars for that. So obviously timing is key there. I agree, I said about unduplicated, the one-time expenditure for sure. Definitely agree with that as a criteria. The cross-department collaboration, the cross-agency collaboration that you just mentioned. And if there's a program that's working well, but Hayward residents aren't eligible, or you know, somebody's not eligible for reasons that have to do with you know, citizenship status, or the zip code inadvertently makes them not eligible for a low income status or something like that. Those seem like good bangs, and overall bang for the buck is kind of my lens, given that it is a limited pool. And so with that, I think there's an opportunity. Certainly there's the need to refill our reserves, to address, you know, to support our workers who have been supporting the community through the crisis, and to make sure that PPE, redesigning workspaces, providing, making sure that people have equipment if they're continuing to work from home. Like those pieces make sense to me internally. And then externally, I'd like to see sort of the majority of the funds go towards really setting us up well for recovery. So if we're talking about grants, some of that may be really allowing people to be innovative about what is it that they need, or what is it that their industry isn't here now, but they've wanted to try. And what are some things that can, you know, can address some of the systemic racism that really led to the disparate impact on communities of color in our city. So I know a few of my colleagues have talked for years about dumping and assistance programs, and I have gone back and forth about my support of that as an approach. But I think it's a very specific way. If we're targeting people in our community were barred from buying homes, and so the opportunity to actually target money that enables us to offer down payment assistance to those folks. I know I'm late to send you the City of Evanston's program, but I promised to do that. So really getting at some of these systemic inequities in a meaningful way. And if we're setting aside dollars to do that, that enables us to sort of pull off investment amounts or something long term. Because obviously we won't solve it even if we put all 38 million into homeownership, we wouldn't solve it for everybody. But if we can set ourselves up to continue to solve it, that would be awesome. And similarly, job retraining, both what industries are going to need to shift, and what are the things we couldn't hire for before. So those are my ads. Oh, and sorry, the last one on the housing thing is there's a number of agencies that are looking to build tiny homes. One of them wasn't funded in the CDBG applications. A couple others are in the development pipeline. That may be housing that's affordable long term. And does it make sense to facilitate creating that in our housing? Because those are typically not as expensive to build as typical affordable housing. And I do support if we need to hire some temporary staff to administer the programs or to get the funding out to communities as quickly as possible. I'm supporting that. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Andrews.
So since it seems like everything has been pretty much listed of what I agree with, but I'll just ditto on a lot of things to save us time. Ditto to Mayor Pro Tem regarding childcare. Childcare was took a huge hit, and it also impacted a lot of women. Women were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and was unable to work. And if we support childcare, then we will support women getting back into the workforce. So definitely that. Agree with rent relief also for small homeowners who provide rentals for the community, making sure that they are able to stay in their homes as well. Yes to, again, Mayor Pro Tem and others, mental health services as a response to emergencies, and also community ambassadors, have the community protect the community and not just have an armed response in order to see how our downtown can be monitored. So I think one of the things we need to really look at is not just from the policy innovation workshop as different options, but look at it now because it's an immediate need now, particularly in our downtown, but also in our shopping centers near anywhere where we see a lot of congregation or see encampments. We need to see how can we leverage some of our other community agencies that are out there already who are cleaning up our streets, who are providing these services, see if they could be more outward facing because we have an immediate need right now. The graffiti, yes, we do need to address graffiti, but I think we need to think about the infrastructure that has the graffiti, because it's not necessarily City of Hayward's infrastructure, but it's another utility that is actually causing this blight in our community. And so if we have code enforcement, use code enforcement to get other agencies to take care of their infrastructure so we can protect our dollars to go back into our community. So that's something else that I think we should be looking at now, not just because we have this stimulus money. I do agree that I am going to reserve my comments as well regarding the policy innovation workshops, but I will say implementation money is one-time cost money. And so I do think that this is a good opportunity to use those funds for a one-time cost. However, when the policy innovation recommendations come, we need to think about immediate action, not just short-term, what can be done 6 months from now, what can be done a year from now, but what can be done tomorrow that we can really, really do something about public safety. And so the community can feel like they're being heard they spoke over a year about changes to public safety, and now we need to do something. So I do think that the stimulus money does provide an opportunity, but we should bring those steps back. And if possible, the next time we talk about the stimulus money, making sure that we have a timeline of when we think certain projects can be done based on how the policy innovation workshops are going. So that's all I'll say for now. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. And Councilmember Salinas?
Well, I want, yeah, thank you. Well, I was, I wasn't even thinking about it, but boy, let me tell you, I'm glad she said it. Councilmember Andrews, thank you for bringing up, leveraging other agencies to take care of their properties and leveraging other agencies to take care of some of the stuff that we've been battling and fighting, along our corridors and, our train tracks and so forth. I think, if, and I know that in staff report, it said that these dollars can be used to leverage, other agencies and so forth. So I appreciate you saying that. Which leads to my first question is, and I think I already know the answer to this, but here in Hayward specifically, will there be other agencies within the city getting ARPA money, like HARD, school district, the St. Rose Hospital? Are other agencies getting, maybe not as much, but are they getting dollars too?
I don't believe that HARD is going to be getting any dollars. And my guess is the school district will get money from the state, is usually where their money comes from. Obviously, the county, BART, AC Transit, I think the transit agencies are probably slotted to get a significant amount of funding. We can do some further research on this to figure out, what other agencies are contemplating that they'll get. But I think just trying to figure out what we're getting and how we can use it was, a challenge. So trying to sort of parse through the hundreds of pages of legislation to figure out what other agencies in the community might get might take us a little bit. We'll see what we can do.
Even at a regional level, and it'll be interesting at this month's League of California Cities East Bay Division meeting. It'll be interesting to see what they talk about. I haven't seen the agenda published, but I'd be interested to see what other agencies are getting dollars. I don't know if ACTC is getting. I'm sure I don't know. If ACTC is getting stuff. But anyways, it'd be interesting to see at the coming up. League of California Cities meeting. But I want to be very brief, and I know there's been a lot said tonight, and there's been a very wide cast sort of thrown out there. We want to capture everything, and I think Councilmember Wahab spent all the money in the first 2 minutes of her talk, but what I couldn't help but, as I was listening to everybody and I was, reading my notes and figuring out, what more can I contribute? And in a lot of what I was, a lot of the direction I was thinking, it's been said already, but I couldn't help but to really go back to the promise that I made to voters. At the end of the day, all of us up here, we made promises to the voters, and we made, and we, and I know there's a few of us up here that campaigned in the thick of the pandemic, and we made very specific pledges, and we made very specific intentions with our neighborhoods. And so I just wanted to read, just at a very high level, the things that the things that I promised to voters, to neighborhoods, and I think, and the reason why I want to do this is because, we spent a lot of time thinking about this, and we spent a lot of time, talking to constituents about these issues, and we were able to, organize people around these key areas for the future of the city. Because I remember, when we were, last year, that's what we were talking about. We were talking about recovery. We were talking about, once we get past this, what would we be doing afterwards? And so so let me just say this. My big guideposts are this. One, I really want to keep families healthy and safe. That's my focus. One point that I mentioned in this is, really investing in the infrastructure that we have that enables us to really expand on public health in a very different way, a way that we may not have thought about it in the past, and that is investing in the fire department and in their staff to continue testing, continue inoculating, and to be quite honest with you, I see perhaps the fire department. It's interesting because I know now virtually every firefighter now is an EMT also, and it'd be interesting to see as a result of this, what will happen. What kind of expertise will change moving forward? So it's keeping families healthy and safe. The other commitment is, housing for all families. Really protecting tenants. I think we're gonna, we have moratoriums already, but soon they will be lifted. What's our plan moving forward? What's our plan to make sure families aren't unfairly evicted? And of course, what's our plan to make sure that they have the resources to stay in place and move forward? The other issue is growing Hayward's economy, investing in small business, getting our local businesses, our neighborhood retail shops opened up again. I know there was a date set this, I think it was today, I read that June 15th is sort of the date to open up 100%. That's ambitious, I think, but if we can do our part to really not only help existing neighborhood retail open, but also, I saw during, over the last year, I saw a lot of hustles out there. There's a lot of families out there that can certainly benefit, from a small city loan to help, fortify what they have and launch something that they've built. And so I just saw a lot of hustling out there by parents and by neighbors that I think they could certainly benefit from. And then lastly is, budget for recovery and growth. I know there's, we've heard, making staff whole again. Absolutely. I mean, if we, we are very mindful up here. And I'll tell you, I've been up here in my time up here. I have always been very pleased, and I have always been very proud to see staff up and down the organization, all across the field, all across the organization, step up and do their part to make sure that we can weather bad economic times, that we can weather pandemics. And, I think one of the reasons why we were able to do what we've been able to do this time around is because of some of the investments and some of the practices and, quite frankly, what employees have clearly demonstrated in the past, and that is their commitment to make sure that our city is fiscally solvent and that we can do the things that we can do because, they do give back. They do step up and they don't wait in line, right? I mean, I can point to, a couple of groups that the moment they see trouble, they step up and they come to us. We don't even go to them. And so I think that's I think that's great. So I want to, we will, I do look forward to a plan, a process to see how we do that. And we're very open-minded and we're listening. And of course, we're going to do that. Conversely, we won't be able to do what we want to do moving forward if our fiscal matters aren't together. And so I know we haven't seen any details yet, but I know that, and I know this is just a work session and this is the first time, $38 million has been put on the table and we're trying to figure out what to do. So, I don't know about Councilmember Marquez is sitting up, taking a Saturday. I don't know. Maybe we can do this in one night. Maybe this would be the one item on the of the agenda, and we start at 5:00 or something. But we'll see. We'll arm wrestle over that one. But other than that, those are sort of the big areas that I'm going to be looking for. Those and I just really appreciate all the work that staff is doing on this. And thank you, City Manager.
Thank you. First of all, I have my cat in here. My cat Ted has joined the meeting, and he wanted to mention, would there be a few dollars for the animal shelter in this? What hadn't been on my list, actually, but I just thought I'd pass that on. We got him from there. So, okay, a lot of really good comments. And it's, we have spent a lot of money among us here tonight, and we do have to be cognizant. There is a limit. It is one-time funding, all of those things. I think the city staff laid out a very good framework for us to continue this effort in. And, it's not going to be easy to make these choices. And yet just think of where we were a year ago and what we're looking at now. We do have the money to help us recover from what we did lose during this pandemic, what we spent to help our community. And I'm very grateful. I do want to thank Congress, our own congressman, everybody who voted for it, our new president and vice president. I think we would not be having this discussion if they were not there, having really pushed this through. In fact, we know there was strong opposition to giving these horrendous state and local governments who, are only the closest form of government to the people and, and can really provide some help. But anyway, I'm very grateful that we have this money. So, I do agree with a lot of what, I think we all know where the priorities are. We want to look at what was lost. So yes, our employees, our workforce, bringing it back safely, and replenishing the coffers that we use to help get our community through this are certainly top priorities. It sounds like from everybody. And then economic development, to help the businesses that have, that have lost. And I did think it was a really good suggestion. I want to say it was Councilmember Andrews, I believe, about the child care aspect of it. Other people might have mentioned that too, but especially, yes, that is an area where they did suffer. We know how desperately we need it. Our families need that. So they are small businesses, really. So that should be an area of focus, but there are others too. Citywide cleanup efforts. And, maybe we can be creative and look at temporary part-time job opportunities. We have that wonderful Raising Leaders program in our Hayward Adult School. Davita Scott heads that. And I think that's a good model for maybe providing some temporary part-time jobs for people in the community who need some extra funds, who have lost income during this, and get some of the work done that we need done in our community right now. Clearly small business and economic development support, green, especially with focus on green infrastructure and helping our businesses to be greener and, reduce their carbon footprint. I'll bring up the South Hayward Youth and Family Center because that still has some funding gap. And I'd like us to consider, that project. Youth literacy and academic support through our library, because I think we really need to step up in that area. We know our students have suffered from being out of school for it'll be more than a year by the time they get back. And so I'd like to see, and we have a wonderful library, our new library, we have staff, we have the programs in place, but if we can do something to really beef that up and figure out what we can do to help these kids get back to, where they should be if they have fallen behind during the last year. In year 2, I'd like to see some of this set aside for some community recovery events. We've lost a lot of our sense of community by not having many of the traditional events that we've had. And I think in some cases, we're going to probably change those events forever. This was the chance to kind of really say, okay, what have we been doing the same way for many, many years? And how can we accomplish the goal but maybe change it up a bit? And so I think that's going to happen. But I still think about the street parties, our new Heritage Plaza that is coming on board. And we did that. I hope we can have community events again. I really truly hope that we are not going into a future where we can't gather in the public square anymore and be with each other, because I think that was one of the most it's probably very special in all communities, but I think in ours in particular, those were very, very special events. It really made you feel the small town feeling of Hayward. So I think we ought to think about that. And we had a suggestion it was Carl Gorange, who is one of our library commissioners, actually sent us an email earlier today with a COVID memorial. So I don't think that's a big ticket item necessarily money-wise, but I think it's an important thing to think about. We did the temporary one at City Hall, when we were a couple of months ago, but that is something to think about. And then, as a lot of people have brought up, there is other funding coming. We have this infrastructure bill that hopefully will get through. So some of the things that we've talked about, there may be funds there. Councilmember Salinas brought up the idea that, other agencies are getting funding. I don't think ACTC itself, but certainly the transit agencies. And then, of course, ACTC is really looking at the infrastructure bill for some really good support for transportation. But we have the possibility of earmarks coming back for regular, federal budget action. So I think, we need to think about what can be provided for with other funds that may be available, and what uniquely should we be using this funding for. And I do think we should, as much as possible, stick to. I know we're kind of required to, but really in fact as well, in spirit, we need to also uphold the idea that this funding is to help communities throughout the country recover from what we've been through for the past year, and really look and make sure that we are doing things with this money in particular that are related in some way to the impacts of COVID. And there are a lot of ways that you can tie things to that, but I do think we ought to keep that in mind. So with that, we will see it back. The staff is planning to bring it back on April 27th. I don't know how people have made suggestions for getting more community input. So I'll just turn it back to the city manager now and see what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of, again, sort of parsing it a little bit, because I think on some of the internal facing funding, I don't know that that's necessarily where we want to get a lot of community engagement and input, because I think it's, replenishing reserves. I think it's pretty solid, but I think there will be some potential opportunities on the community facing side to get to create some community opportunities. So maybe we move forward with some of the internal facing with the first tranche of funds, and then we have more of a community engagement process that we can then sort of put more of the community facing dollars once we've had time to spend more time talking with the community. So I think there's some ways we can talk through it, and
we don't have to make all the decisions in the this month. I mean, this is a 2-year process of even getting the funding. So okay, and I see that Councilmember Wahab wants to.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So our one-time funds policy is basically a 50-50 policy, right? I think you referenced it a little bit earlier in the sense of, if we had, we can't do unfunded liabilities, which we get. So, that frees up 50% right there. But I did want to provide some clarity to the public. Number one, our firefighters, and when we're talking about, kind of the mental health things, they are paramedics. So they're fully trained. And I just wanted to highlight that. They are not EMTs. And for our staff, I do believe that the concessions that were made were a little less than $2 million. And then for the reserves were roughly about $5 million. So that's about, if you were to add it up, it's about $7 million. And that would equate to about 18% of, everything that we're talking about with the $38 million. So I do want to highlight that just for clarity as to what we're really talking about. So again, I stand where I stand, and just wanted to provide that in regards to the percentage points. And I do think that's important to point out. Thank you.
And
I assume that when it comes back, it will come back with some actual number.
Correct. We're also looking at what we're projecting in terms of revenue loss this year and in the following years in our forecast. So it's not just revenue loss from last year, but how are we making sure that the budget is whole for this year and in the next couple of years?
That's fine. I just wanted to talk about the limitations. Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the discussion this evening, but not to the end of the discussion. And I just, again, this is really, really helpful, and it puts a little bit of a bright spot for us to look at the end of this long and in many ways very stressful and challenging year that we've had behind us. And so we will now move on, if I can find my agenda, to the next thing on it, which is comments from our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I do actually have a few comments I wanted to highlight. And first, I wanted to just acknowledge Dustin Clausen, our finance director and interim HR director right now, and as well Assistant City Manager Jennifer Ott, who is joining us from her vacation this week for the council meeting. But both of them were instrumental in putting this staff report together and really helping me and the executive team put together this framework. And so I just wanted to acknowledge both of their contributions to the effort this evening, even though you didn't hear a lot from them. So, okay, so let me get my city manager comments up here. I have a couple. So I wanted to just highlight that next week, the city will launch its first post-measure OO recruitment for applicants to the city's commissions, boards, and the Keep Hayward Clean and Green Task Force. And if you remember, in November 2020, the voters in Hayward passed Measure OO, which amended the Hayward City Charter to remove the restriction that appointees to city boards and commissions had to be registered voters. So we will be doing a lot of outreach, and our city clerk, Miriam Lenz, and our community media relations manager, Chuck Finney, have been working closely together on what that outreach looks like and how we will be reaching out to the Hayward population. I'm sorry, I'm going to sneeze, which is why I keep trying to. It's been a really bad allergy season. anyway, so just kudos to them, and look out for that announcement coming out next week. And the we'll start the recruitment coming here shortly. I wanted to congratulate our finance director, Dustin Clausen, as well as our deputy finance director, Nicole Gonzalez, and our entire budget team for the 39th consecutive Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the Government Finance Officers Association. We just received word of that. And this is an annual award where we submit our budget to basically a peer rating panel that looks at our budget compared to best practices and standards, generally accepted standards from government finance officers around the country and around the world. And so we want to, it's just a great recognition of our financial management practices. And if anyone is interested in seeing the comments on our budget document, we get a very comprehensive comment list. So happy to share that with any council members who are interested. But kudos to the finance team, especially last year, given the last minute, we had put a budget together and then with COVID had to basically retool the entire budget process and to work with our labor groups to kind of make a whole lot of changes right up to the last minute. So really a challenging year for the budget. And then last is a very interesting item announcement from our Hayward Executive Airport. The membership-based private jet company SetJet just opened its Bay Area hub at the Hayward Executive Airport on March 15th. They will offer private jet flights to Los Angeles, San Diego, and Las Vegas, and then will eventually launch service to Cabo San Lucas from Hayward Airport. They feature the Challenger 850 corporate jet, which will be departing from the APP Jet Center terminal. And you can look, I just actually went on their website. The fares are pretty steep, but if you're looking for a splurge to go from the Hayward Airport to Los Angeles or Mexico, take a peek. You can find it at www.setjet.com. So we welcome them to the Hayward Airport and look forward to having them as a tenant. So thank you.
I have to say that for you to have made that announcement on a night when Council Member Zermeño is not here is, I mean, somewhere he's doing cartwheels if he knows about it, because he has been asking for years to make our airport international or to have service like that. So I'm sure he's going to be very happy when he hears about it if he hasn't already. And just had to mention him since he isn't here tonight. So thank you for that. And if that's it, we'll move on to council reports and announcements. And I see Councilmember Wahab.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I do just want to say congratulations to the airport staff. I know that, I asked for kind of like this particular program is actually available in Oakland and a couple of other cities, and I thought it was cool. I also want to see if we can get our passport renewal and kind of the interviews done at our local airport for those individuals that want to bypass kind of some of the long lines that are at airports that I personally don't like. So I do just say congratulations, and I know we're set to open in January, so COVID has delayed a lot of things, so congratulations again. I do want to make a couple public announcements. Our local Sikh Gurdwara, which is up in the hills in Hayward, is actually having a COVID vaccination. I'm going to call it a drive. It's between 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. They would like for you to register before you actually come to the 1805 Hill Avenue, but they also will accept walk-ins. They are limited in how many vaccinations they have. Again, it's the one single shot vaccination by J&J. So I just wanted to highlight that. They asked that we actually share this. This is potentially not their only vaccination event, and they're going to have a couple more. So I just had a conversation with them in the last 2 days, and so they were very, very excited to talk about they're able to secure more for more events. So if you register, you will maybe also be allowed to take it in a couple weeks when they have their next ones as well. So I wanted to highlight that as well. And then number two is our county assessor, Fong Law, is going to have a homeowners expo. This homeowners expo is a Zoom meeting, so it's actually you could sit at home and do it. It's on Wednesday between 12 to 1:30 p.m. The program will talk about programs that lower your property taxes, how to keep the family home without being reassessed, resources for first-time buyers, and loans available to you for home updates. So I think we have a couple good resource programs that are in the way. So wanted to highlight that, as well as Tammy Rossell's Living Love Scholarship. This scholarship is available to Hayward residents, current 12th graders in particular, that attend any Hayward high school. The scholarship value is about $500. All three events are actually listed on my personal social media. So if you guys want to take a look at that, I do just wanted to highlight that. And then finally, I think a little bit something more serious. There is a video that is going around on social media regarding the use of force by our police officers. I do just want to highlight, and this is my direction to our city manager. I do want us to do a thorough investigation of that in particular. I think that a lot of people are very deeply concerned about that. And as we talk about public safety, I just want to be as transparent as possible. I know we released a statement. So again, just highlighting that. If you could provide any additional information within a week or two, that would be very much appreciated by the rest of the residents in Hayward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to remind the public I am your representative on the Alameda County Mosquito Abatement District Board, and this year we're celebrating our 90th anniversary. It was founded in Hayward, so they're doing really good work, and just want to encourage everyone to be vigilant about water around their backyards. I know we haven't had much rain, but people are starting to use sprinklers and hoses, so just making sure that you don't have sitting water. And also let you know that there's been no West Nile virus cases of West Nile virus in our community, and they are launching again the West Nile virus updated website in line. So if you see a dead bird, you can report it to 1877 WNV. WNV, and then the word bird. So it's really important if you see any dead birds in our community to call that number to make sure it can be properly tested. And they also have launched a quarterly website. So I encourage everyone in our community to sign up to receive that website. And you could find that at www.mosquitoes.org. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Andrews.
Yes, I was also going to speak about the video that is circulating around regarding use of force. So I agree, if we can expedite what Internal Affairs is reviewing, that would be really important for the community to hear. Also, release any videos related to that as soon as possible so we can get some answers. The other thing I do want to remind people that it is Earth Month. April is a time for us to take care of our Earth. And so if you want to sign up for the Earth Month Challenge, you can go to the City of Hayward website for more information. Thanks.
Okay.
Mayor, can I just respond? Because I just want to make it clear to the council and the community that we cannot release the results of the internal affairs investigation. And so while I may be able to release the body cam footage, in the police department, there may be some information about officer discipline if that does in fact result that we would not be able to release publicly. So I just want to be clear about expectations around what's going to come back to the council and to the community around that incident. So just so we're all on the same page about that.
Whatever you can share. Thank you.
Yes, I think there is justifiably a lot of concern about that incident. And so as Councilmember Ender said, whatever you can release them. But I would also ask that everybody remember that one video does not tell the whole story, and that there are, there's a lot of other factors that will be considered here, and or circumstances that aren't necessarily revealed just by the video. So, okay. Well, with that, I'll just say that probably have received, the council members have received copies of letters I've recently, sent. I don't take credit for totally writing them. However, these, and I don't always mention the letters that I send supporting legislation in our own California legislature or even in the U.S. Congress, but these two, particularly in the last week, have been really kind of exciting. There's the one is for Assembly Bill 71 by David Chu and joined by Assembly members Rivas, Bloom, and Wicks that will help provide commits the legislature to a comprehensive plan to address homelessness by investing dedicated, ongoing state investment in the prevention of and long-term solutions to homelessness. And that is a real key, ongoing, because we know that, we have committed, we have invested in facilities, but they need operating funds. And so was very pleased to support that piece of legislation, and also by Assembly Member Chu. This one really excites me too. Assembly Bill, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the number. It's something like 5. It just went out of my head, but it is a bill that will open the door for communities in California to consider automated speeding enforcement on our roads. And as all of us know, it's one of the biggest complaints we get in the city are, speeding cars. We have not been allowed to do that kind of automated, control, automated, measurement, and then, enforcement of our speed limits. And with this bill, we may be able to look to a time not too long away when we will be able to start doing that. And I think, hopefully address this problem in a more meaningful way, because we get complaints from all over the city about this issue. So do you remember anyway, you can find it. It's David Chu, and it's Assembly Bill. It's something like 550, but it just went out of my head. Anyway, with that, I think that brings us to our adjournment this evening. We will not be meeting next week. As far as I know, it's a second Tuesday, but we will be back the following week on I believe that's the
20th.
April 20th. So until then, I'll see some of you. Have a good rest of your evening, and thank you all for your input tonight. And with that, we are adjourned.